Chapter 481. We can see more from the top. Chu Luchen looked up at the top and said excitedly. It's more tiring to climb from the top. Prince, you'd better take good care of yourself before coming back. Xiao Wanru said. She reached out to hold his hand and walked down the mountain directly. Although Chu Luchen's health was better than last time, he was still worse than ordinary people. She had asked Mingqiu Nun clearly. It was not so easy to treat the fetal poison at birth. Moreover, after so many years, Chu Luchen had not been cured. It was said that he did not care about his health at all. This made Xiao Wanru feel a little sad inexplicably. If someone did not care about his own health, what would he care about? Being dragged by Xiao Wanru so strongly, Chu Luchen looked a little embarrassed and reluctantly pulled Xiao Wanru with his hand. Seeing that she ignored him, he had to follow her down the mountain. Xiao Xuanzi had also climbed up at some point. He was timidly trying to persuade Chu Luchen to go down the mountain to take medicine. Seeing the scene in front of him, he was very happy. In the past, no one could persuade his master to do something he was unwilling to do. Even the Empress Dowager had no way to persuade him. His master had plenty of ways to persuade the Empress Dowager in the end. Now with 5th Miss Xiao, it was really different. In the future, his master could really be saved. Dr. Qi had said more than once that his master should pay attention to his own health and not take medicine intermittently. Otherwise, his body would really not recover and he would not live for long. Now, it was all good. Xiao Xuanzi happily followed the two of them down the mountain. The following days were very peaceful. It was so peaceful that Xiao Wanru almost forgot that Duke Xing's mansion was behind her. After living on the mountain for a period of time, Chu Luchen went down the mountain. After that, he had been recuperating in Prince Chen's mansion and did not appear in Yuhui Nunnery much. No one knew that he secretly went to Yuhui Nunnery. Rui, and Great Elder Princess, and Xiao Yuanhao went up the mountain to see Xiao Wanru from time to time. With Rui and Great Elder Princess's support, the nuns in Yuhui Nunnery did not dare to treat Xiao Wanru badly. Shui Rulan gave birth to a son named Qin Xian, who was called Brother Xian. When Brother Xian grew up a little, Shui Rulan and old Madame Qin also took Brother Xian up the mountain to visit Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru lived a very peaceful life on the mountain. She liked painting, so she used Xiao Yenru's silence room, which was very peaceful. She spent most of her time here. Seeing that she really liked this courtyard, Rui and Great Elder Princess discussed with the abbess of Yuhui Nunnery and donated a lot of money for incense oil to let Xiao Wanru use this courtyard. Apart from the main house in the middle, she could enter the other places and rest there when she was tired. Because there were some personal belongings such as Xiao Yenru's clothes in the main room, it was inconvenient for Xiao Wanru to enter. Originally, the abbess of Yuhui Nunnery would not agree to this kind of thing. However, on the one hand, it was Rui and Great Elder Princess who came forward. On the other hand, although the courtyard belonged to Xiao Yenru, it was Duke Xing's mansion who sent people to renovate it. Besides, Xiao Wanru was Xiao Yenru's cousin and also a member of Duke Xing's mansion. Based on these two opinions and the agreement of Master Pushun, Yuhui Nunnery had a very peaceful life. Xiao Wanru lived a very pure life in the Yuhui Nunnery. Except for these two courtyards, she basically didn't go anywhere else. After that, when Zhang Qilan came to the Yuhui Nunnery to cultivate in seclusion, she also lived a peaceful life with her for a period of time. Zhang Qilan also liked painting. She accompanied Xiao Wanru for a few months before reluctantly leaving the mountain. There was no time in the mountain, and the capital city at the foot of the mountain was very peaceful. The princes didn't get married for the time being, so no one wanted to get married. There was nothing to compete for. Gradually, some women who had been famous for their talent and beauty faded out of the public sight. After getting married, of course, they couldn't be in the limelight as they used to be when they were girls. However, some women were still talked about enthusiastically in the circle of aristocratic families in the capital city. For example, the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion saved a fainted old woman on Wenxin Road in Huaguang Temple. Not only did she not dislike others, but she also slowly helped the old woman up with her servant girl. It could be said that she was kind and dignified. She was famous for her talent and beautiful appearance. Although she was said to be the most beautiful woman in the capital city before, she was not very old at that time. Now she was 16 years old and was in the prime of her life. It was said that when they saw the first Miss Xiao helping the old woman up that day, all the people on Wenxin Road were stunned. It was said that she was a fairy descending to the mortal world. This time, the title of the most beautiful woman in the capital city firmly fell on Xiao Yanru. A busybody deliberately wrote a poem, "There is a woman who is beautiful and kind," which shocked the whole capital city for a time. The first Miss Xiao's beauty became more and more well known, and she was faintly said to be the most beautiful woman in Dongsang Kingdom. It was said that the first Miss Xiao was also very good at painting, which was taught by Pushun Nun of Yuhui Nunnery. Pushun Nun was originally from a painting master, but later she became a nun because of an accident. It could be said that she had a profound family background, and all her painting skills were passed on to Xiao Yanru. Pushun Nun also once said that Xiao Yanru was very talented, and willing to work hard. If she could stay on the mountain for another 2 years, she might have been a master now. Once this saying was spread, it immediately made people dislike the fifth Miss Xiao, who was still on the mountain now. It was said that if the fifth Miss Xiao, who was not liked by everyone in Duke Xing's mansion, had not made a fuss about going to Yuhui Nunnery to observe mourning, the first Miss Xiao would not have given her courtyard and had to go down the mountain. After more than 2 years, what had happened in the past was not so clear. Everyone only saw Xiao Yanru's elegance, Xiao Yanru's kindness, and Xiao Yanru's talent. They had long forgotten that Duke Xing's mansion forced the newly recognized fifth Miss Xiao to go to Yuhui Nunnery. Bored, Chu Liuxin stretched out his foot and kicked a few bamboos on the side. It was already autumn, but the bamboos still looked very green, which made him feel a little better. Puff! He raised his eyes and looked through the bamboos at several misses from aristocratic families on the other road. He immediately became depressed and inexplicably unhappy. He didn't want to get married yet. Why should he choose someone? This kind of thing had been annoying him recently. 2 years ago, when he said that he would not choose a consort, he was happy for a long time. Now he also felt that he was still young. He was just the age of his brothers 2 years ago. Why did they say that they were too young to choose a consort at that time? Now, they had not chosen a consort when they were so old, and it was his turn again. Your Highness, do you like someone? The little eunuch Xiao Yozi, lowered his voice and asked excitedly. They came to see secretly, so of course, they couldn't let the misses in front of them know. No. Chu Liuxin squatted down, took a broken bamboo branch, and casually drew a few lines on the ground, feeling very annoyed. Master, if you don't like it, next time you tell the Empress Dowager and ask her to invite more people out. Eunuch Xiao Yozi also squatted beside him and tried to flatter him. None of them are good-looking, and I don't like them. Don't choose any more. I'm still young. Chu Liuxin angrily poked holes in the ground with the bamboo branch in his hand. He couldn't help it. Of course, he understood what his mother meant. She wanted him to choose a good person early. When it was about time, his mother would go to the Empress Dowager and beg. At that time, he could ask for the imperial grandmother's decree and directly give the order to grant him a marriage. But the problem was that he didn't want to get married at all. He didn't want to choose a consort at all. He felt that he could still play for a few more years. It was not too old to play for another 2 or 3 years. There were many people in the royal family who got married at around 20 years old. Why should he get married at such a good age when he was only 15 years old? Your Highness, if you don't choose, Consort Ming will be angry. At that time, she may choose for you directly. Eunuch Xiao Yozi tried to persuade him with a sad face. At that time, not only would His Highness suffer, but he would also be beaten with him. Thinking of this, Eunuch Xiao Yozi felt his butt hurt. After fooling around with His Highness, Consort Ming beat him up. If His Highness hadn't been pleading for him, he would still be lying in bed. He didn't want to be beaten by Consort Ming again. His buttocks couldn't be beaten anymore. The prince could only try to persuade him. He didn't understand why the prince didn't take a fancy to any of these young ladies who looked so pretty and cute. Could it be that the prince had taken a fancy to the number one beauty? But it was said that the two princes also liked the first beauty. This was really difficult. I'm still young. Chu Liuxin was silent for a moment. Then, he thrust the bamboo branch in his hand directly into the ground. He stood up, clapped his hands, and sighed helplessly. Tell me that you don't like these ladies and give me a few more. At least he didn't say that he didn't want to choose. He would delay it as long as possible. Chu Liuxin walked forward casually. This road was different from the one the ladies had taken just now. It was more remote and quieter. The mountain path was winding and not easy to walk on. Looking from afar, there was no place to rest. Master, since you don't like them, let's go back. Eunuch Xiao Yozi looked at the winding path and suggested with a smile on his face. As long as His Highness said that he still wanted to choose, he wouldn't be beaten by Consort Ming. Let's go up and have a look. Chu Liuxin suddenly became persistent and strode up. Your Highness, if we go up, we may not see her. Let's go. Eunuch Xiao Yozi wanted to reach out and pull him, but Chu Liuxin walked up quickly. He couldn't pull him back, so he could only follow behind and whisper. What are you whispering about? Come up quickly. Chu Liuxin waved his hand unhappily and said. Yes, I'll come right away. Your Highness, please slow down. Be careful not to fall. Eunuch Xiao Yozi said helplessly and quickly followed him. Looking at the winding path above, he sighed in his heart. He knew that his master would not give up. Since 5th Miss Xiao entered Yuhui Nunnery, his master would definitely come to Yuhui Nunnery if something happened. Now, even the consort selection was done here. How ridiculous it was to have a blind date in a nunnery. However, His Highness still talked nonsense in front of Consort Ming. He said that if there was fate, Buddha would be the one who could come to a conclusion. Buddha would definitely see more clearly. As for why it was put in a nunnery instead of a temple, of course, it was because he was afraid that the ladies who were chosen would be offended. Although there were also men who performed rituals in Yuhui Nunnery, there were much fewer of them than in temples, so it was much quieter. Seeing that His Highness talked nonsense in front of Consort Ming but made her nod repeatedly, Eunuch Xiao Yozi, as a sensible person, felt really bitter in his heart. He felt that he was the only one who knew the secret that others didn't know, but he couldn't say it out loud. He was really sullen. Chapter 482. Miss, Madam of Duke Xing's mansion wrote to you again, urging you to go down the mountain. She said that it has been more than 2 years, and you can live in the Yuhui Nunnery or Duke Xing's mansion for the rest of your time. There is no need to restrict you too much. Chu Lu came in and respectfully presented a letter in her hands. Xiao Wanru put down the brush in her hand. After washing her hands in the clear water beside her, she took the letter, walked to the window, opened it, and read it. The letter was written by Madam of Duke Xing recently. She had received such letters almost exclusively, accompanied by some gifts from Madam of Duke Xing. After he finished reading the letter, he folded it again and was about to stuff the letter back in. However, when he saw the letter, he stopped and slowly pulled it out again. This time, he wasn't looking at the words on the letter, but at the corner of the letter that wasn't written. A few orchids and a few leaves were stuck to the corner. The fragrance was just right and emitted a faint fragrance. Patterns of different shades were also painted on the corner. This was the most popular Huajian in the capital at this time. Then, he took a good piece of paper and carefully drew on it. Then, he took the fresh flowers and dried them in the sun. Then, he pasted them carefully according to the method he had drawn. Because it was made of fresh flowers, there was a faint fragrance on the paper, and this was the one in front of them. Since Chu Lu bought a few copies of this kind of flower paper from the foot of the mountain, Xiao Wanru would make some by herself when she was free. She was so bored that she even used some painting skills on this kind of flower paper, and gain some experience. However, this one was very unique. After looking at it carefully, she raised the corners of her mouth with a smile. "Miss, is this posted by Madam of Duke Xing?" Seeing Xiao Wanru looking at it seriously, Yu Jie also came over to watch the fun. "No." Xiao Wanru shook her head and said with certainty. There were traces of Xiao Yanru on it. If she didn't know, she really wouldn't know. His gaze fell on a few words in the middle. The words were the same as the ones he had seen recently. They were written very casually, and there were even one or two parts that were not matched. Making this kind of flower paper was the play of girls in the boudoir. Madam of Duke Xing would not have the leisure to do this kind of thing. It should be the eldest young lady of Shao Mansion. Xiao Wanru said with a slight smile. Although it was just an ordinary orchid with a few leaves, it was very imaginative. Moreover, the simpler it was, the more people could compare it. She had no kinship with Xiao Yanru and always treated her as an outsider. First Miss gave some of the flower paper she made to Madam, and Madam took one and gave it to Miss. Chu Lu suddenly understood. She pursed her lips and said, "I don't know what they've been up to recently. Weren't they all quiet and peaceful before?" She had been on the mountain for more than 2 years. It was indeed very quiet for a period of time before, and no one came to disturb her. After Huiqing suffered a loss, she no longer dared to deal with Xiao Wanru in public with great fanfare. In addition, Great Elder Princess appeared from time to time, so the entire Yuhui nunnery was respectful to Xiao Wanru. At least on the surface, no one would make things difficult for her, and no one dared to disturb her because she lived in seclusion here. However, since Madam of Duke Xing sent the first letter to the mountain, there seemed to be more things in the Yuhui nunnery, and there were always some things related to Xiao Wanru. For example, Yu Jie brought a message just now, saying that there would be a few misses coming here to play today. On the surface, it was to remind Xiao Wanru, for fear of disturbing her quiet cultivation. But in fact, the road in front of the courtyard was not arranged for people to play in the past. On the one hand, it was because she was cultivating in seclusion, and on the other hand, it was because there was a high wall here, where the s of the late emperor were locked up. If something happened, the Yuhui nunnery could not bear the responsibility, so they should avoid it as much as possible. The Yuhui nunnery was so big, and there were too many places for them to play. The front mountain, the back mountain, the left side, and the right side were all places. Why did they have to come here? Moreover, this was not the first wave recently. There had been several waves. Even if Xiao Wanru lived in seclusion, sometimes she would still run into them. It was really not a happy thing. She was cultivating in seclusion, not playing. If she ran into people from time to time, people would always gossip. "Did you find out anything?" Xiao Wanru calmly put the letter back into the envelope, casually put the envelope on the table in front of the window, and asked. "Nothing. Nothing. Now everyone in the capital city is saying that the first Miss of Duke Xing's mansion is beautiful in both heart and in person. She deserves to be the first beauty." Chu Lu said disdainfully. Xiao Wanru didn't go down the mountain, but she occasionally went down the mountain. Sometimes she went to the princess mansion to get some things, and sometimes she helped Xiao Wanru buy some things in the market. Now the first Miss Xiao had the best reputation outside. Every time she heard about it, she would talk about the fairy-like behavior, gentle behavior, and beautiful appearance of the first Miss Xiao. Chu Lu really felt that it was ridiculous. The first Miss Xiao was obviously a schemer. If it weren't for her scheming, she wouldn't have made an excuse to retire when her master came up the mountain. Moreover, after leaving for so many years, it seemed that she was really forced to leave by her master. Moreover, the thing about Huiqing was definitely caused by the first Mississippi. As long as it was mentioned, many people said bad things about her master. Chu Lu wanted to get angry when she heard those words, but after she came back, her master didn't care much and told her not to take it seriously. "Wait a little longer," Xiao Wanru said meaningfully. Her eyes were very calm. She had painted for a long time just now, so she planned to go out for a walk. Outside the courtyard, the ramp that Chu Luchen took her to walk through before was the place where she used to relax. She left Chu Lu to clean up the room and walked up slowly with Yujie. After walking for a while, they came to the high stone where Chu Luchen had shown her before. Hearing some sounds below, she couldn't help looking down. There were several young madams and a group of servant girls talking by the stream below. There was also a nun standing beside them. Obviously, she had led them here to play. "Miss, the nuns of the Yuhui nunnery are getting more and more outrageous. They even took the initiative to bring people here." Yujie couldn't help feeling a little angry. It was completely different to say that others accidentally broke in and took the initiative to bring them in. Xiao Yenru lived in the Yuhui nunnery for a period of time and was favored by Pushun Nun. Pushun Nun was originally from a big family and had a great reputation in the Yuhui nunnery. Even if she didn't say anything, there were still many people who felt unfair for her. A female disciple who was about to become a master of painting was delayed by me. It was a loss for the entire Yuhui nunnery. Xiao Wanru leaned against the big stone beside her, rolled her watery eyes, and said softly with a smile. "Miss, Pushun Nun looks like a master on the surface, but in fact, she ignores you, which tells everyone that she doesn't like you." Yujie grew up in the nunnery, so how could she not understand some simple principles in the nunnery? Even in a quiet place like the nunnery, there were intrigues. So what? She didn't say that she hated me in person, did she? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows and said slowly. Xiao Wanru had never seen Pushun Nun, who was said to be an otherworldly master, even once. It was said that this nun devoted herself to cultivation and rarely met outsiders. She seemed to be like an ascetic monk. However, there were still rumors in the nunnery that Pushun Nun did not like Xiao Wanru. There were even rumors in private that Pushun Nun disliked people who were too scheming the most. In turn, this was to say that Xiao Wanru was too scheming. However, this was just a rumor, and no one could verify it. If she insisted on asking, she would only ask for humiliation. It was like she had a guilty conscience. If she doesn't say it or hint it, why are there so many rumors? Yujie became more and more angry. She patted the corner of the stone beside her angrily and said, "Miss, in fact, I can also make a big fuss with this matter. If I make a big fuss about it, let's see if the Yuhui nunnery can bear it." Yujie felt that she really couldn't stand it anymore. Every time she saw a few little nuns whispering to each other when they saw her, she was really annoyed. But when she looked at them, they immediately pretended to be doing their own things. Did they really think that she was a fool? "Why are you in a hurry? They will be anxious." Xiao Wanru said with a smile and reached out to pick up a fallen leaf on the ground. It was going to be autumn soon, and some withered leaves had begun to fall. There was a huge maple tree beside the big stone. When the wind blew, some maple leaves would fall. "Is it a letter from Madame of Duke Xing?" Yujie's eyes lit up. She had always believed in Xiao Wanru. A letter from Madame of Duke Xing, Xiao Yenru's increasingly good reputation, and the Yuhui nunnery can't help but involve me. All of these indicate that someone can't wait any longer, or the prince's consort selection is going to start again, and there will be another fight. Xiao Wanru said with a meaningful smile. "Miss, do you mean that the first Miss Xiao is also going to start fighting?" Yujie approached Xiao Wanru with excitement in her eyes. She wanted to see which one the first Miss Xiao, who was said to be extremely kind, favored. She won't. She wants to go back to the mountain. She can watch the tigers fight quietly, and what she wants is the final success. Xiao Wanru raised her cherry lips with a hint of sarcasm. Xiao Yenru's mind had never been difficult to guess. She would never put her chips on one person, and what she wanted was the final success. No matter who succeeded, she would reach out to pick the fruit of victory. But there was a premise, and the premise was that she could not get involved in it in advance. "Miss, you blocked her way up the mountain. She wants to trick you down the mountain." As long as you stop cultivating in seclusion or are not sincere in your cultivation, she can spread the rumor that you are just talking about observing filial piety. Since it is just a talk, it seems that her behavior of going up the mountain to learn painting seems to be more noble. Yujie had been with Xiao Wanru for a long time, and gradually some of her ways of thinking were similar to Xiao Wanru's. At this time, after thinking carefully, she immediately understood. Wait patiently. She is in a hurry, but I am not. Xiao Wanru leisurely swept the tip of her nose with a fallen leaf and said with a little naughtiness. She was a little curious about why Xiao Yenru ended up in the imperial palace in the last life. Was it because Chu Luqian was the crown prince at that time? She guessed everyone but ignored Chu Luqian, so she had to enter the imperial palace to be a concubine? In this life, there had been a lot of changes. She wanted to see how far Xiao Yenru could go. It had been more than 2 years, almost 3 years. It was time for her to return to the secular world. Chapter 483. On the mountains, the scenery and trees were rich. Behind the rugged rocks, a girl in a black robe was fluttering in the wind. She was extremely beautiful. Although her clothes were light and elegant, she had a kind of fairy-like posture. That kind of ethereal and elegant posture was definitely not something that could be described by gorgeous clothes. At first glance, people would think that she was an immortal. She was pure and gorgeous. She was absolutely different, but it made people feel that she should be like this. Her appearance was beyond everyone's imagination. Hey, where is she? She was here just now. Why did she disappear? Is she really a fairy? This is the Yuhui nunnery. It's really possible. Chu Liuxin, who was not far away from these misses, looked at Xiao Wanru in astonishment. His eyes widened, he pointed at Xiao Wanru excitedly and said to Eunuch Lu, "It's the girl from Qin's mansion, the girl who climbed over the wall, Your Highness, she is now the 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion." Eunuch Lu was also stunned, but he still knew how to reply. He had seen the 5th Miss Xiao before. Although she was very delicate, she was not so beautiful. It had only been more than 2 years since he last saw her. It was unbelievable. Eunuch Lu felt that the 1st Miss Xiao, who was widely known now, could not compare with the 5th Miss Xiao. Duke Xing's mansion was really full of beauties. Let's go and have a look. Chu Yusen excitedly pulled his lapel and looked up at the terrain where Xiao Wanru was. He and Xiao Yozi's position was a little higher than those young ladies' positions, but because they were a little higher, they could see the situation on the opposite side more clearly than the young ladies below. But if they walked directly over, it would be a little further. The mountain road was rugged, so they could only see, but not meet. Your Highness, if we go there now, the 5th Miss Xiao should have gone down. Eunuch Lu felt that it was not appropriate, so he looked around and persuaded. If they went down now, they would first meet the misses who asked His Highness to go on a blind date. But they couldn't like them, so they had to pass by them to find another Mississippi. Eunuch Lu was afraid that these misses would complain to concubine Ming after they went back. I don't care. I have to meet an old friend of mine and say hello to him. Chu Liuxin said excitedly. He turned around and was about to rush down the cliff where he was. Your Highness, 5th Miss Xiao saw you. Xiao Yozi reached out to grab him and said anxiously. Chu Liuxin hurriedly looked back and saw that Xiao Wanru, who was on the high cliff, made a simple bow to him, which matched her black robe. Then she disappeared behind the big stone with Yujie, who was also dressed in a black robe. There should be a mountain path in the forest. Was he going down the mountain? Let's go and have a look. Chu Liuxin said stubbornly. Your Highness, have you thought about what you are going to say when you meet the few young ladies below? Xiao Yozi stretched out his hand and pointed at the few young ladies from the various mansions who were still discussing spiritedly below the cliff. Chu Liuxin stopped and scratched the ground helplessly. Then, he looked up at the figure in front of him, who had already disappeared. His head drooped. Let's go. We'll take a detour in front. Maybe we'll bump into them. I've been friends with 5th Miss Xiao for many years. I haven't met her for so many years. Now that I see her, I have to go over and greet her. Chu Liuxin answered absent-mindedly and walked down the mountain path in another direction. He would not meet those young ladies if he went down from here, but he was getting farther and farther away from the place where Xiao Wanru had just appeared. Xiao Liuzi wondered if he had met a fake highness. When did His Highness and 5th Miss Xiao have such a good relationship? They had just met, but 5th Miss Xiao had been hiding from His Highness. After that, His Highness had repeatedly complained that 5th Miss Xiao was not a good person and said that he must find an opportunity to punish 5th Miss Xiao. Later, he just didn't have a chance. Why did they become old friends who hadn't seen each other for many years when they met again? Where did this so-called old friend come from? Why didn't he, as a personal eunuch, know? Touching his confused head, Xiao Liuzi felt that it was better not to ask. So be it. Anyway, it was his prince's opinion. 5th Miss Xiao might think about it. As a eunuch, of course, he couldn't care too much. Chu Liuxin hurriedly went around the cliff with Xiao Liuzi Xing. After a long detour, they arrived at the place where Xiao Wanru had appeared before. As expected, there was no one there. When he looked down, the young ladies who had been here before had also disappeared. There was no one on the empty mountain. Looking down from a distance, he saw layers of Buddha halls in the nunnery among the mountains. There was also a high wall that isolated one part of the nunnery. There were so many Buddha halls and so many houses. He really couldn't tell which one was Xiao Wanru's place of cultivation. Your Highness, where is that place? Why is there such a high wall to separate it? Such a high wall should be about the same as the palace wall. How could there be such a high wall in the Yuhui nunnery? Aren't they afraid of being investigated by the government? Xiao Liuzi's eyes fell on the high wall in surprise. How could the high wall built in a nunnery be of such a high standard? How could the high wall built in a nunnery be of such a high standard? The former emperor's concubines are all here. Chu Liuxin said weakly. After saying that, his eyes lit up and fell on the high wall. Since this was the best place for cultivation, Xiao Wanru had stayed there for 3 years. Could it be that she was there? Or even if she was not there, she should be on the side. He had to admit that at this moment, Prince Xian knew the truth. Come on, let's go down. Chu Liuxin immediately became energetic again. He turned around and walked down with Xiao Liuzi. The high wall was very high. Even if they reached the bottom, they could still see it from a distance. Along the way, the goal was quite clear. Soon, Chu Liuxin and Xiao Liuzi stood under the high wall. But there was no door here. The two of them walked along the high wall and finally saw a side door. Xiao Liuzi went forward to knock on the door, but no one answered. Chu Liuxin strode over and wanted to knock on the door himself. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him. What can I do for you? No one is allowed to disturb you here. Please go back. The two of them turned around and saw 2 middle-aged nuns standing behind them, looking at them with unkind expressions. This is Prince Xian. Our Prince Xian wants to see the person who is cultivating in seclusion inside. Xiao Liuzi reacted quickly. He immediately understood that there should be guards here, so he quickly revealed Chu Liuxin's identity. Sure enough, the 2 nuns looked a little better. One of them looked Chu Liuxin up and down, then lowered her head and said, Prince Xian, please go back. It's not convenient to disturb the person who is cultivating here. Since the former emperor's concubines were sent here to cultivate in seclusion, it meant that they would live in seclusion from then on. No one was allowed to approach them or come out. Are there really people who are cultivating in seclusion inside? Chu Liuxin was happy. Of course they are people who are dedicated to cultivating. They are all outsiders and have nothing to do with the secular world. If you have nothing to do, please leave. The nun raised her head and said firmly. She did not tolerate Chu Liuxin's behavior because of his identity. An outsider? Chu Liuxin felt that something was wrong. Even if Xiao Wanru was cultivating in seclusion, she should not be considered an outsider, right? Didn't she say that she would cultivate in seclusion for 3 years to observe filial piety for her parents? He asked anxiously, are those who cultivate in seclusion for a few years and then go out? Those who cultivate in seclusion for a few years or a few months are not inside. The people inside plan to cultivate in seclusion for the rest of their lives. The nun explained. Is there anyone who has cultivated in seclusion for a few years on your mountain? Chu Liuxin breathed a sigh of relief, rolled his eyes and asked. I don't know about this. Please ask others. We are only in charge of the affairs of the sect here. The nun said unmoved. You don't know even though she is right beside you? A beautiful little nun. No, not a little nun. Where's the one with hair? A beautiful little nun with hair. Have you seen her? Chu Liuxin gestured a few times and looked at the nun in front of him expectantly. Since he had described it in such detail, she should know. The misses of aristocratic families who cultivated in seclusion on the mountain would basically wear the black clothes given by the Yuhui nunnery. Although the description of the so-called little nun with hair was not very detailed, it should be very vivid. In addition, he had specially added, in a few years. Chu Liuxin felt that there was no one else but Xiao Wanru. There is one over there. The nun thought for a moment, pointed in a direction and said. Great, thank you, nun. Chu Liuxin looked in that direction and saw a courtyard in the distance. He was overjoyed and cupped his hands to the nun. When he was about to leave, he suddenly heard the door beside him suddenly open and a woman's exclamation came from inside, Nuns, come and have a look. She is in trouble. As she spoke, there was a whimpering sound. Chu Liuxin subconsciously looked back and saw a nun in her 20s standing at the side door with tears on her face and a look of panic. He was surprised and froze for a moment. He moved aside and looked at the nun in the door from head to toe. Compared with the nun outside, the nun inside the door looked much weaker. Even though her black hair had been shaved, she still looked a little delicate. What's the matter? A nun stepped forward and asked anxiously. Our master vomited blood. Please go and get a doctor, otherwise, it will be really bad. The nun inside said while wiping her tears. The two nuns outside looked at each other, and the former one asked again, she didn't need to take the medicine before? It's useless. She is still sick and vomited blood. Please, save our master. The nun inside knelt down with a plop and kowtowed 3 times to the two nuns outside. She raised her head and looked at the two nuns with tears in her eyes. You go back first. We will report to the abbess. Someone will come to see the doctor later. A nun outside said. Then one of the two stayed behind and the other hurried to report. As for the nun inside the door, she closed the door again. Only when she closed it, she stole a glance at Chu Liuxin and then closed the door. Chapter 484. Your Highness, let's go. Eunuch Liuzi reached out and pulled Chu Liuxin's sleeve. What happened here was so strange. Eunuch Liuzi felt that it was better to stay away from this kind of thing related to the late emperor's Okay, let's go. Although Chu Liuxin was curious, he did not want to stay and listen to the result. He turned around and left in the direction pointed by the nun with Eunuch Liuzi. The nun guarding outside the door breathed a sigh of relief. Although they had orders not to let anyone in, the person in front of them was the 4th son of the current emperor. If he really made trouble and wanted to go in to have a look, they could not stop him. It was the best for him to leave now. Looking around and seeing that there were no suspicious people, the nun returned to the courtyard where she lived. After she left, a little while later, the side door opened quietly. It was the nun who had been crying. She poked her head out and looked around. She found Chu Liuxin's back and observed carefully, and then carefully withdrew her head. Then the side door closed silently. Your Highness. Which Highness is this? She muttered to herself in a very soft voice, like the autumn wind brushing past her face. Apart from herself, No one else knew that she had said such a sentence before. It was a very small courtyard with 3 rooms, including the main room. The low wall was completely different from the high wall he saw just now. Chu Liuxin looked at the courtyard in front of him with suspicion. Was this really the place where Xiao Wanru cultivated? Even if Xiao Wanru was not favored by Duke Xing's mansion, she was still the granddaughter of Rui and great elder princess. Why could she only live in such a simple place? Could it be that all the misses who came here to cultivate in seclusion had to look like this? He suddenly felt that this kind of cultivation was really not something that ordinary misses from aristocratic families could bear. No wonder misses from aristocratic families rarely cultivated in seclusion. Chu Liuxin felt that he might not be able to bear such a living environment. She had no food to eat, no room to live well, and had to be locked up all day long. How could the little girl who was used to climbing over the wall bear it? Did she also climb over the wall at night? Your Highness. Eunuch Liuzi saw that he was stunned there for a long time and reminded him. Knock on the door. Chu Liuxin straightened his robe and said. He had not seen this little girl for many years. Now that they met again, he had to leave a good impression on her. Xiao Liuzi obeyed and went forward to knock on the door. After a few knocks, the door opened. A girl in a black robe looked at the master and servant outside in surprise. Who are you? It was a beautiful girl about 14 or 15 years old. She was dressed in a fitting black robe and her black hair was simply tied up. At first glance, she looked almost the same as Xiao Wanru. Even their heights were similar. Xiao Liuzi was stunned for a moment, but he reacted quickly and hurriedly said, We're looking for the owner of this courtyard. I'm the owner of this courtyard. What business do you have with me? The young girl sized up the two of them with vigilance in her eyes. You are the owner of this yard, how could you? Where's Xiao Wu? Where is she? Chu Liuxin pushed Xiao Liuzi aside and came forward to ask. I'm the owner of this courtyard, and I've lived here for 5 years. I've never changed my place. I'm afraid you found the wrong person. The young girl said unhappily and reached out to close the door. Most of the people in the Yuhui nunnery were women. Even if there were men who came to offer incense, they would not come in. Chu Liuxin reached out to stop the door and looked the young girl up and down. Who are you if not Xiao Wu's servant girl? Have you lived here for 5 years? Don't tell me that you've been living on the mountain since you were very young. Young master, I don't know who Xiao Wu is, and I'm not the servant girl you mentioned. As for what you said, I've been living on the mountain since I was a child. If you don't believe me, you can ask other people in the Yuhui nunnery. The young girl said unhappily. After saying these words, she slammed the door hard. Chu Liuxin was caught off guard. When the door was closed, he was also pushed a few steps away. He looked at the closed door in astonishment and gasped. She's really strong. Although he was caught off guard, it was a man's strength after all. The woman in the door was also strong, and she even closed the door in front of him. But was it really not Xiao Wanru inside? Chu Liuxin didn't think so. He went forward and slammed the door hard, saying loudly, Xiao Wu, come out. I have something to talk to you about. He shouted loudly and slammed the door loudly. The door suddenly opened, and the beautiful young girl inside the door stared at Chu Liuxin coldly. Young master, if you have something to talk to someone else, please leave. I live here alone, and the Xiao Wu you're looking for is not here. I don't believe it. I have to go in and have a look. Chu Liuxin poked his head in and saw that there was a very simple small courtyard inside. He wanted to see what was going on. Seeing him poking his head in while talking to himself, the young girl was so angry that her face turned pale. She suppressed her anger and said coldly, what if the person you're looking for is not inside? If the person I'm looking for is not here, I will naturally leave, and I will not disturb you again. Chu Liuxin said indifferently. His words were extremely contemptuous, but it was annoying to be knocked on the door like this. The young girl had no choice but to move aside. She pointed inside and said, young master, please leave as soon as possible after you've seen it. People in the mountains are most afraid of being disturbed when they cultivate. Okay, I'll leave after I've seen it clearly. Even if you don't drive me away, I won't stay. Chu Liuxin said with a smile as he walked in. Of course, he would not take things too hard and go to the mountains to cultivate. After cultivating like this for 3 years, Chu Liuxin felt that he was not far from becoming a saint. The courtyard was as simple as it was outside. There were 3 rooms, and the door of the main room was slightly open. Chu Liuxin poked his head in and took a look. Under the cold eyes of the young girl, he left with a hollow smile. The 2 rooms on the left and right were not inhabited by people. There were some sundries in them. One of them looked like a study, and the other one looked like some sundries in Chu Liuxin's eyes. There were no people living on either side, only one person living in the middle. It seemed that it was really not Xiao Wanru. He just saw Xiao Wanru with a servant girl, who he had seen before. Servant girls could not live with their masters, and he heard that Xiao Wanru had more than one servant girl. Thinking of this was indeed not Xiao Wanru's place. Chu Liuxin had to admit that he had made a mistake, or the nun who had shown him the way had made a mistake. Seeing that Chu Liuxin was about to leave, the young girl suddenly asked, "Is the person you're looking for an extremely beautiful lady?" Yes, an extremely beautiful one, about 13 or 14 years old. Have you seen her? She has also cultivated here for 3 years. You should know her, right? Chu Liuxin immediately had hope again. At this time, he was very quick-witted and immediately grasped the key point. She lives far away from here, but there is a quiet room in front that belongs to her. I heard that she painted there. It was not her who lived there in the beginning. The young girl gave a brief introduction. Yes, it's her. Where is her quiet room? Chu Liuxin was overjoyed. He did not care what others said and nodded repeatedly. It was not easy for him to get some news, so he naturally would not let it go. It's in the opposite direction from where I am. Go from here, turn left along the road, and then turn right after a while. You will see a large courtyard, the young girl said. The door was closed heavily behind Chu Liuxin, as if she had shut the plague outside the door. However, the young girl did not leave and frowned tightly. She did not know whether the current situation was good or bad. At this time, she could not allow any accident to ruin the big plan. She hoped that she was thinking too much and that this person would leave soon. Chu Liuxin felt that he could still ask some questions. Looking at the tightly closed door, he had no choice but to follow this direction to look for her. This time, it did not take long for him to find a courtyard. Looking at this courtyard, Chu Liuxin felt that it was a little reasonable. Such a courtyard seemed to be the work of Rui, and great elder princess. The one just now was really not good enough. Xiao Liuzi went forward to knock on the door. When the door opened, he saw Yujie. Xiao Liuzi was immediately overjoyed and said, "Master, come quickly. It's 5th Miss Xiao's maid. Come and have a look." Chu Liuxin strode over and laughed proudly when he saw Yujie in a black robe at the door. Looking at the master and servant who were laughing happily at the door, Yujie was stunned at first, and then she looked at them expressionlessly. She saw that they could no longer laugh. Who could still laugh when being looked at as if they were looking at a fool? When the smiles on their faces stopped, Yujie bowed sideways to Chu Liuxin and asked, "Your Highness, what's the matter? Is your miss in there?" Chu Liuxin stuck his head out and wanted to look inside again, but his eyes were blocked by Yujie. "My miss is inside. She is meditating now, so it's not convenient for her to see you, Your Highness." Meditating? She's not really a nun. I have something to ask her. Chu Liuxin said carelessly. "Your Highness, please go back. My miss is meditating inside and it's not convenient for her to see you." Yujie reminded him again. "I know that your miss is meditating. Even if she is a nun, there will be 2 or 3 old friends visiting. How can I not see her?" Get out of the way, get out of the way. It's rare for me to see your Mississippi, Chu Liuxin said impatiently and was about to come in. Yujie still wanted to stop him, but she heard Xiao Wanru's voice behind her, Yujie, leave. Let Prince Xian come in. In the corridor, Xiao Wanru stood in a plain and loose black robe, which reflected her snow-white skin and beautiful face. Just now, Chu Luiyue saw her too clearly from a distance. At this time, looking at Xiao Wanru standing in the corridor, he clearly saw her elegance and charm. Her cherry lips were naturally red and plump, and her dark watery eyes were as deep as a pool. Chu Luiyue stopped and his heartbeat inexplicably accelerated. Xiao Wanru in front of him really amazed him. Although he had long known that Xiao Wanru would definitely be an outstanding beauty when she grew up, it was one thing to know and another to see. Prince Xian felt that the weather was too hot. It was not a good sign that it was still so hot in autumn. Could it be that it would be hot all the way in autumn this year? Chapter 485. Xiao Wanru sat cross-legged on the mat, reached out to pour a cup of tea for Chu Liuxin, pushed it to the opposite side of the table, and said lightly, "There is no good tea in the mountain residence. Please forgive me, Your Highness." Chu Liuxin picked up the tea beside him and took a sip. He tasted it and said, "It's not bad. At least it's not like what I thought. I just soaked it with firewood and drank it." "Your Highness, why are you here?" Xiao Wanru smiled slightly, picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, put it down and said, "Of course I'm looking for an old friend. Xiao Wu, you've been here for more than 2 years. Isn't it time to go down the mountain?" Chu Liuxin said as if he was very familiar with her. He directly called 5th Miss Xiao as Xiao Wu. "About half a year." Xiao Wanru said calmly, "How did you know I was here, Your Highness?" "I went to the wrong place before. There is a lonely woman living there. It is said that she has lived there for 5 years. Are there many such women who have lived in the Yuhui nunnery for several years?" Chu Liuxin felt that it was really strange. It was already shocking that Xiao Wanru would live here for 3 years. Now there was someone who would live here for 5 years. Did she really plan to cultivate here for a long time and become a nun? Xiao Wanru lowered her head and thought for a while. Her butterfly-like long eyelashes fluttered twice and she said slowly, "Did Miss Mo tell me the way? I don't know if it's Miss Mo's or Miss Chow's. Anyway, it's a small yard with 3 rooms in that position. I went the wrong way before. I don't know how the nun of the Yuhui nunnery showed me the way. I actually went to the wrong place." Chu Liuxin said discontentedly. He picked up the tea beside him and took another sip. "Miss, it should be Miss Mo." After thinking for a while, Yujie said affirmatively. Miss Mo had lived here before they went up the mountain. She had a cold temperament. They had been here for more than 2 years, but they were not familiar with her. They only knew that her surname was Mo and that she had lived on the mountain for 4 or 5 years. It was said that she was a relative of a nun of the Yuhui nunnery, so she was taken care of here. Occasionally, she would help the Yuhui nunnery with things. However, it was unknown why she had been living here since she was not a nun. It seemed that she had no intention of leaving. "Alright, let's not talk about Miss Mo anymore. Xiao Wu, do you really not want to leave? You have lived here for so long. Although the scenery is beautiful, no matter how beautiful it is, you can't live here forever. You are a miss from an aristocratic family, the lineal daughter of Duke Xing's mansion, and the granddaughter of great elder princess. I am your cousin, so I have to care about you." Chu Liuxin said as if he was familiar with him. "Your Highness, I live here to cultivate in seclusion and observe mourning for my father. Please don't bother me," Xiao Wanru said with a serious face. "Hey, 5th Xiao, how did this prince disturb your cultivation? This king and you can be considered old friends. Back when you climbed over the wall, this king was the one who kept watch for you. Now, you're turning your back on me. That's not good. After all, we have a good relationship, and we're cousins." Chu Liuxin stammered with an aggrieved expression, saying, "You're wrong. You're ungrateful. How can you do this?" Xiao Wanru really felt a headache. He reached out and pressed his forehead twice, gesturing for him to shut up. After Chu Liuxin stopped, Xiao Wanru said, "Your Highness, may I ask you why you want to come to the Yuhui nunnery?" She had been in the Yuhui nunnery for more than 2 years. She had not seen Chu Liuxin come here before, but she knew that he had come several times recently. Although she did not see it with her own eyes, how could there be no rumors about Chu Liuxin going up the mountain? She did not appear in front of others, but Chu Lu and Yu Jie came out from time to time to inquire about things. "I didn't intend to come here at first, but I heard that the mountain scenery in the depths of the Yuhui nunnery is very beautiful, so I wanted to come and have a look. Thinking that you happen to be cultivating here, I came to see you again." Seeing that Xiao Wanru did not drive him away, Chu Liuxin's mood immediately improved. He explained with a smile, and then leaned his head towards Xiao Wanru and said, "Your big sister has been in the limelight recently. Even Imperial Grandmother praised her. She is really talented and beautiful. She even said that in front of many people." "What limelight?" Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. At this time, Xiao Yanru was in the limelight again. She drew a picture. "Yes, it's the scenery here." Chu Liuxin jumped up, walked to the huge window, and drew the half-closed curtain a little wider. Looking at the mountains outside, he nodded repeatedly and said, "The painting is really similar and beautiful. It is said that it was drawn in her quiet room. It had been drawn long ago, but it was not dyed. Now that it has been dyed, it is really beautiful. Imperial Grandmother saw it and said that she wanted to see it in person. The Empress Dowager is coming." Xiao Wanru's eyes darkened a little. Of course she can't come right away, but Imperial Grandmother is interested, so she naturally wants to see it. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, of course, it may be 10 days, half a month, or 1 or 2 years. Chu Liuxin laughed and thought it was very interesting. "Why did Big Sister take out this painting?" Xiao Wanru asked calmly. Her watery eyes blinked twice to hide the darkness at the bottom of her eyes. No wonder there were more and more people coming here recently. It turned out that there was such a thing. It is dedicated to Imperial Grandmother. It is said that Imperial Grandmother likes to look at the scenery, so she presented this painting she has painted for many years to Imperial Grandmother. It happened to be the day when Imperial Grandmother received the honorary title of aristocratic family, so there were a lot of old madams. Chu Liuxin reached out to touch the window and answered without looking back. Sometimes, the Empress Dowager and the Empress would get in touch with the madams of aristocratic families and ask them to enter the palace on a few days. Xiao Wanru knew this in her last life. However, all the madams who came were honorary title of aristocratic family. The Empress Dowager's old madams were the main guests, while the Empress Dowager's old madams were some younger madams. Big Sister is not old enough, right? Xiao Wanru lowered her eyebrows and asked. No matter how great Xiao Yanru's reputation was, she would not appear on such an occasion. It was brought by the old madam of your mansion, not by the first Miss Xiao herself. But after that, Imperial Grandmother was very happy and specially sent someone to summon her. It happened that I was also there, so I saw the whole scene clearly. Chu Liuxin said proudly. He also saw the painting at that time. On the one hand, he felt that Xiao Yanru was really beautiful, and on the other hand, he also felt that he had to find an opportunity to see it. That was why concubine Ming asked him to go on a blind date and specially set the place in Yuhui nunnery. Of course, Chu Liuxin felt that he originally wanted to look for Xiao Wanru, but he couldn't find her several times before. Does the Empress Dowager know that I live here now? Xiao Wanru's long curly eyelashes fluttered twice, and then she asked leisurely. Imperial Grandmother probably didn't know, and I didn't know at that time either. It was only after I arrived at Yuhui nunnery that I asked the nuns in the nunnery that I learned that you are using the first Miss Xiao's silence room. It is said that you are also using it for painting. Xiao Wu, can you do it? Only someone like your elder sister can draw well. Don't tell me you're learning from her. Chu Liuxin turned his head and asked curiously. He had never heard that Xiao Wanru could paint before. Why did she suddenly jump out and say that she wanted to paint and use Xiao Yanru's silence room? Oh, I understand. You said that on purpose. You just want to occupy this beautiful place with a beautiful scenery. It's a good idea. If I live on the mountain, I will definitely choose a good place. If this good place is occupied by others, of course, I will find a reason to occupy it again. Chu Liuxin suddenly felt that he understood. He looked at the beautiful scenery outside the window, and then looked at Xiao Wanru, who was sitting leisurely on the mat and drinking tea, and laughed. Xiao Wanru squinted at him and said, "Prince, do you mean that I deliberately competed with the first Miss Xiao?" "I didn't say that. I don't know whether you competed or not, but at least you occupied the first Miss Xiao's silence room. However, the scenery here is beautiful. Even if it is empty, it will be a waste not to occupy it." Chu Liuxin walked back with a laugh and sat on the mat again. He imitated Xiao Wanru and crossed his legs. When he saw Xiao Wanru drinking tea just now, he suddenly felt hot and thirsty. He picked up the teacup at hand and drank more than half of the cup at once. Only then did he feel a little thirsty. He handed the cup in his hand to Xiao Wanru, indicating that it was empty. Xiao Wanru reached out to elegantly pick up the teapot, filled more than half of his cup, and then added some for herself. What did Big Sister say after entering the palace? She didn't say much. She just flattered Imperial Grandmother and made her very happy. Imperial Grandmother also rewarded her heavily. She said that Miss Xiao was blessed, a kind and good girl, and that she had a good sisterly relationship with Xiao Tianzi. Has a good sisterhood? Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. She held the teacup harder, looked up at Chu Liuxin curiously, and asked, "How did my big sister show a good sisterhood?" "Is it your birthday?" Chu Liuxin asked with a smile. "Did my good big sister say this?" Xiao Wanru guessed lazily. Yes, it was really your good big sister. She said that your birthday is coming soon. This is the last birthday you will celebrate in Yuhui Nunnery. She wants to come and spend it with you." Chu Liuxin said, "On that day, why don't I come too? Anyway, I have nothing to do." Although Chu Liuxin also had a position now, it seemed to Chu Liuxin that it was an idle position. His father had assigned a position to his eldest brother and second brother. If he did not assign a position to himself, he would probably not be able to stand it. That was why he had his own business. He did not take it too seriously. He still played as he used to. "Your Highness, let's talk about my big sister. I want to know how she helped me celebrate my birthday." Xiao Wanru's watery eyes flashed with a trace of seriousness. She realized that she had neglected something. She had thought that she would at least wait until she was forced to go down the mountain before taking action. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yanru took action first. Xiao Wanru said so in front of everyone in the Empress Dowager's palace, which attracted a lot of people's attention. At the same time, it also made people think that she snatched Xiao Yanru's silence room in order to learn from her. The more she learned, the uglier she became. This was probably the situation at present. Not only did she learn to walk, but she was also domineering. She snatched her big sister's silence room and made her unable to come back. This should also be a reason, right? Xiao Yanru couldn't wait to take action. Birthday. Her birthday was half a month later. Chapter 486. She said that you have lived in the Yuhui Nunnery for a period of time. She didn't let you have a good birthday in the Yuhui Nunnery before because she was afraid of disturbing your cultivation. Now that it is your last birthday in the Yuhui Nunnery and it is almost time to go down the mountain, she can't disturb you. She also said that in the following period of time, if you allow her, she also wants to observe mourning with you and go down the mountain together. Xiao Wanru observed mourning for her parents for 3 years, but Xiao Yanru didn't have to. After all, they were separated by a branch. But if she had to observe mourning for a few months, it would be reasonable and people would praise her as a filial daughter. She is really affectionate and loyal. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly with her eyes indifferent. Don't you like it? Chu Liuxin sensitively sensed the unhappiness in Xiao Wanru's words and said in surprise. Why should I like it? How can I be so shameless to celebrate my birthday in such a quiet Yuhui nunnery and disturb the cultivation of so many nuns? Aren't I afraid that others will say that I don't follow the rules and behave improperly? Xiao Wanru raised her head with obvious displeasure in her watery eyes. Her words reminded Chu Liuxin. He reached out to pat his thigh and said, yes. It is inappropriate to celebrate a birthday in a nunnery. It is a great disrespect to Buddha. Since it is a great disrespect, my big sister wants to celebrate it for me. In the end, everyone will definitely think that I have thought about it and I am the one who made the mistake. Xiao Wanru said. Could it be that she said that because she didn't pay attention? Maybe she didn't think so much. Chu Liuxin thought for a while and explained for Xiao Yanru. Xiao Wanru was not surprised by Chu Liuxin's explanation. In the past 3 years, she had stayed on the mountain, but there was news about Xiao Yanru from time to time. The reputation of the first Miss Xiao was getting better and better. With such a good reputation, even if there were some small flaws, others would take the initiative to explain for her. She was such a good person. How could she have any bad ideas and actions? At most, she didn't think it through. If something bad really happened, it was just a coincidence. Chu Liuxin's explanation was in line with most people's thoughts. Or if something really happened, others would only blame her, not Xiao Yanru. Your Highness Prince Xian, are you here to help First Miss persuade her to have a lively birthday party in the Yuhui nunnery and then be scolded by everyone? Yu Jie couldn't help but say angrily. Hey, what are you talking about? How is this prince here to help your young miss persuade you? But your young miss is really not bad. Chu Liuxin widened his eyes in displeasure. Does your highness mean that big sister will express in front of the Empress Dowager that she will love me, help me celebrate my birthday, and then accompany me on the mountain for a period of time? Xiao Wanru interrupted him, smiled slightly, and summed it up. Yes, that's what I mean. She is also kind. Chu Liuxin was a little dispirited. Then can I trouble your highness to help me take a letter down the mountain to my elder sister? Tell her about my situation on the mountain and tell her that I don't want to celebrate my birthday on the mountain. Thank you for your kind intentions. Xiao Wanru's watery eyes flickered slightly, and she already had an idea. Okay, no problem. That's right. You two are blood-related sisters, so you should love each other. If there's anything, you can explain it to her. Chu Liuxin was happy and nodded repeatedly, thinking that it should be like this. Xiao Wanru stood up, walked to the table in front of the window, picked up the writing brush, thought for a while, and wrote. After finishing writing, she let it dry for a while, folded the paper, put it in the envelope, turned around, handed the letter to Chu Liuxin and said, Sorry to trouble you, Your Highness Prince Xian. My elder sister and I have been friends for a long time, but I haven't seen her until now. You haven't seen First Miss Xiao? Chu Liuxin took the letter and said in surprise, Didn't you two get together when you were in the Yuhui nunnery? When you just came up the mountain, she shouldn't have come down the mountain yet, right? She was indeed on the mountain at that time, but she said that she would focus on painting in this quiet room. She wanted to see me outside the quiet room, but I didn't expect that Grandma asked her to go down the mountain. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly, and her eyes became more and more indifferent. These words seemed to be a coincidence, but Chu Liuxin inexplicably heard some other meanings. He was not really stupid, but because Xiao Yanru's reputation was too good before, he didn't think in that direction. At this moment, he heard some meanings. He pinched the envelope in his hand and asked in confusion, Are you two on bad terms? I don't know. Xiao Wanru shook her head and looked a little bitter. Then she bowed deeply and said, I have to trouble you, Your Highness. Or if big sister really makes such a thing happen, I can't escape the reputation of being arrogant and conceited. What's more, I'm still in the mourning period. Although it's almost over, it's not over after all. I'm afraid that I'm unfilial and inconsiderate. Chu Liuxin's heart suddenly moved. He suddenly remembered that when Xiao Wanru had just recognized her as her relative, there was a rumor in the capital city that everyone in Duke Xing's mansion didn't like her. Could it be that the first Miss Xiao also didn't like her for this reason? Thinking of this, what the first Miss Xiao said in front of the imperial grandmother did not seem to be so kind. At that time on the mountain of the Yuhui nunnery, both of them were there, but they couldn't find time to meet each other. Now she said with great fanfare that she was going to celebrate the birthday of this cousin whom she had never met. The meaning of this was somewhat inexplicable. I'll send a letter to the first Miss Xiao for you and explain it for you, Chu Liuxin said cautiously. Thank you, Prince Xin. Xiao Wanru thanked him again. Since he had given the order, Chu Liuxin didn't stay any longer. He said goodbye to Xiao Wanru and walked out. But after taking a few steps, he suddenly turned around and said, I'll give you a gift on your birthday. We are old friends. It's fine if you don't know it, but if you know it and I don't give it to you, it won't be justifiable. Thank you, Prince Xin. It's just that I don't need to cultivate on this mountain, so that others won't talk about it. Xiao Wanru refused with a smile. Well, okay. Chu Liuxin touched his head and felt that what she said made sense, so he immediately turned around and left. After he left, Yu Jie took a step forward and said, Miss, what does the first Miss Xiao want to do? I can't wait any longer. Xiao Wanru said meaningfully. She returned to the mat and sat down. After thinking for a while, she glanced at the whole quiet room and suddenly reached out to point at a box in the corner. Bring this over and have a look. The box was very exquisite, but only one corner could be seen. It was covered with a blanket, which covered most of the box. In the past, no one had noticed the box in the corner. Looking around the room, only this box, which had been ignored, was very likely. Miss, it's full of sundries used by the first Miss Xiao for painting. What's the use of it? Yu Jie said in confusion, but she still walked over, lifted the blanket, and pulled the box over. It was tightly locked with a key. Open it. Xiao Wanru said with a slight frown. The box had been here for a long time, but she didn't care about it. But now she had to pay attention to it. Xiao Yanru might make use of everything possible, so she had to kill all possibilities in the initial state. It was a little familiar. Miss, just open it like this. We'll be discovered. Yu Jie widened her eyes in shock and said. Without the key, she could only break it open. If she broke it open by force, the first Miss Xiao would definitely ask about it. Although she had never seen the first Miss Xiao, Yu Jie felt that she came with evil intentions. She could cause a lot of trouble, let alone something important. Is there anything else in this silence room that belongs to her? Xiao Wanru looked around with her watery eyes and asked. That's all, Yu Jie said honestly. After living here for more than 2 years, even if there were some things that belonged to the first Miss Xiao, they had long been gone. Only this box had been left here because it was locked and looked big. Besides, Pushun Nun told them to keep it. Then open it and have a look. Xiao Wanru said. Yes, I'll take it to the yard and smash it. Seeing that Xiao Wanru insisted, Yu Jie nodded and looked around. She didn't see any tools that could be used, so she dragged the box to the door. When she arrived at the door, she lifted the box over the threshold, found a sharp stone in the yard, and smashed the lock on the box in the corridor. Then she dragged it in again. Yu Jie opened the wooden box and saw what was inside. She was stunned and asked, Miss, what is this? It was a set of clothes, and it was actually a set of gorgeous clothes. Although gorgeous clothes were precious, they were not rare. However, this was in the Yuhui nunnery. In the past 2 years, Yu Jie had seen plain and dark black clothes. She had never expected to see a set of gorgeous clothes here. She reached out and took out some clothes, skirts and a large jewelry box. She opened it and found a set of exquisite jewelry. Miss, the first Miss Xiao's clothes were left here. Yujie murmured in surprise, but it is said that the first Miss Xiao has devoted herself to learning painting and meditated. Why did she leave such a set of clothes here? Are you sure it is hers? Xiao Wanru thought for a while and was not too surprised. If it is not hers, could it be yours, miss? Yujie said subconsciously. After saying that, she suddenly took a deep breath and said, Miss, did the first Miss Xiao really plan to do so? This set of clothes is so new. It doesn't seem to have been left here for 2 or 3 years. It was not only the first Miss Xiao who had stayed in this quiet room, but also her master. Yujie knew that her master did not have this set of clothes, but she could not stop others from thinking so. She had been in mourning for 3 years and cultivated restlessly on the mountain. She even found some gorgeous clothes and took them up the mountain. No one would believe that she was cultivating and observing mourning. If this kind of thing was verified, the good reputation she had accumulated over the past 3 years would be swept away. Even if it wasn't verified, with such an incident, it was enough to make people suspect that Mrs. 2 years of secluded cultivation was just a cover-up for others to see. The so-called filial piety was, of course, all fake. Xiao Wanru reached out to pick up the clothes and touched them, and then shook them. She had grown taller quickly in the past few years, and this set of clothes was obviously not enough. Fortunately, Miss won't be able to wear such clothes. They are too small. Yujie relaxed. She took a breath, patted her chest and said. She could tell at a glance that the clothes were not suitable for Miss to wear. If the clothes are small, they were worn before. If the clothes are just right, they are worn now. If the clothes are big, they can be worn in the future. Xiao Wanru pulled an embroidery edge on the corner of the clothes and said. The size of the clothes could not prove anything. They are embroidery edges and toggle and loop buttons of butterfly clothing shop, but not all of them. Every piece of other clothes is fine. They are indeed carefully prepared. With a deep look in her watery eyes, her eyes suddenly became cold. Chapter 487. There were also clothes in the last life, but they were not for her, but for Qin Yuru. In the last life, Qin Yuru became the new favorite of old Madame of Duke Xing. Duke Xing's mansion left a courtyard for her and asked her to live with old Madame of Duke Xing from time to time. When such news came, Madame D and Qin Yuru were ecstatic. Then the masters of Duke Xing's mansion gave all kinds of gifts. The gifts from old Madame and Madame of Duke Xing were all extremely gorgeous, and this set was given by Xiao Yenru. When it was delivered, Qin Yuru happened to be in a pavilion in Qin's mansion. It was raining, so the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion carried the box to Qin Yuru. Hearing that it was sent by the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion, Qin Yuru did not dare to neglect it and asked the servant girl to pick it up. Unexpectedly, the servant girl loosened her grip and the box fell to the ground. The gorgeous clothes inside fell to the ground and were stained with mud. Qin Wanru happened to be in an attic, which was relatively close to the pavilion where Qin Yuru was, so she saw the scene in front of her. She was afraid that Qin Yuru would think of ways to torture her if she knew that she saw her embarrassed look. So she hurriedly hid and did not dare to make any sound. The servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion immediately changed her expression. She glared at Qin Yuru and said, First Miss Qin, if you don't like the gift from our first miss, just say it. Why do you ruin the gift that our first miss has carefully prepared? After saying that, the servant girl turned around angrily and was about to leave. Qin Yuru was so scared that she came up to hold the servant girl's hand and explained, it was really an accident just now. It was not intentional. How could it not be intentional? Now it has been dirty. You have ruined our first miss's good intention. Xiao Yenru's servant girl said rudely. I'm sorry. I really didn't mean it. It's this bitch's fault. I will definitely punish her severely. Qin Yuru explained with sweat all over her head and then glared at the servant girl who was still kneeling and begging for forgiveness. First Miss Qin, will you say that it has nothing to do with you? Even if we kill this servant girl, it's just a servant girl's life. How can it be compared to the face of our first miss? You humiliated our first miss like this. I will definitely report this to our old madam when I go back. The maid raised her head proudly. Hearing that she was going to report it to old madam of Duke Xing's mansion, Qin Yuru panicked and said hurriedly, I will go with you to apologize to your first miss now. I will definitely explain it to your first Mississippi. After that, Qin Yuru hurriedly followed the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion to Duke Xing's mansion. Because she left in a hurry, she didn't even take her servant girl with her. In this case, Xiao Yanru could do whatever she wanted to Qin Yuru. A show of strength was enough to make Qin Yuru obey her obediently. This should be one of the most important reasons why Qin Yuru obeyed Xiao Yanru in the future. Xiao Yanru was very good at grasping the psychology of others. She told old madam of Duke Xing's mansion that Qin Yuru humiliated Xiao Yanru, which was enough to make Qin Yuru obedient. Was it her turn now? She didn't care about the box when it was placed in the corner, but now she became vigilant because of Chu Liuxin's words. What did Xiao Yanru want to do? Or did she think that she would be able to control him just because she released such a huge rumor? If not, did she have any other tricks? After thinking for a while, she remembered that there was a box left by Xiao Yanru here. The clothes have been here for a while, but they haven't been washed for more than 2 years. They are still new. Putting down the clothes in her hands, her watery eyes became more and more distant. If they haven't been here for more than 2 years, when did they get them? Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, Yujie's face changed dramatically. They had used this silence room for more than 2 years. If the clothes in it were proved to be only more than 1 year old, others would definitely think that they were Mrs. Clothes. Xiao Wanru stood up, walked to the corner, picked up the blanket thrown aside by Yujie, looked at it carefully, and said, the blanket has been here for a long time. It seems to be 2 or 3 years old. The blanket was very big, and when it was spread out, it would completely cover the box. The blanket has been here for 2 or 3 years. That is to say, the blanket was left by the first Miss Xiao, but the clothes inside were changed by you. You used the blanket left by the first Miss Xiao to cover your gorgeous clothes and used the blanket left by the first Miss Xiao as a cover. Even the nuns in the nunnery who cleaned the nunnery would not find it and would only think that it was the first Miss Xiao's old clothes, right? Yujie took a deep breath and suddenly understood. Miss, what should we do now? The clothes were obviously left for Miss, and they had been here for so long. If someone found it, Miss would not be able to explain. Even if she could prove it to Miss, she would not be able to explain it clearly. The silence room was borrowed, and everything inside was cleaned by the nuns of the Yuhui nunnery. Xiao Yanru must have sent someone in the Yuhui nunnery to put the clothes in the box. Go down the mountain later and check the clothes in Butterfly Clothing Shop. Ask Nanny Dong if she has the purchase record of these toggle and loop buttons and embroidery edges. I don't know if the clothes were made in Butterfly Clothing Shop. Check the purchase record of Duke Xing's mansion in Butterfly Clothing Shop. It would be best if Nanny Dong could recognize where the clothes are made. Xiao Wanru put down the blanket beside her hand, sat on the mat again, picked up the tea beside her, took a sip, and said after thinking for a while. The toggle and loop buttons and embroidery edges were from Butterfly Clothing Shop, but she could not guarantee that the clothes were made of the same material. She guessed that it was very likely that they were not made of the same material, but not everyone could get such a good material. Although the clothes were not made of any ready-made clothes shop, the materials were excellent. She could not think of it, but it did not mean that Nanny Dong could not think of it. In the past 3 years, Butterfly Clothing Shop had become more and more famous, but no one knew that she was the owner of Butterfly Clothing Shop. Okay, I'll go down the mountain later. Yujie knew that it was not a trivial matter, so she nodded hurriedly and said. Before you go down the mountain, go and tell Puyu Nun that I will not see guests recently. I'm going to copy 100 volumes of scriptures for my parents. Only when I calm down can I be more devout. I won't see guests from Duke Xing's mansion. Just tell them that I will come out after I finish copying. Xiao Wanru said, looked at the surrounding environment, smiled slightly, and said meaningfully, "Tell them that I will copy in this silence room. This silence room belongs to the first Miss Xiao. What if she insists on coming over?" Yujie blinked and said, "My parents are also her uncle and aunt," Xiao Wanru said with a slight smile and a deep look in her eyes. She was determined to take this silence room. No matter whether Xiao Yanru wanted to deal with her or wanted to get back this silence room, she would not return this silence room to Xiao Yanru, at least not before she left. When she just arrived at the Yuhui nunnery, she borrowed Xiao Yanru's silence room. Since she borrowed it, she had no intention of returning it. "Okay, miss, I'll go down the mountain now and ask Chu Lu to come and serve you." Yujie was relieved. Her Mrs. biological parents were also the first Miss Xiao's elders. Moreover, there was Rui, and great elder princess. How could the first Miss Xiao really dare to force her miss, who was devoted to filial piety to her parents, out of the silence room? As for when she would come out, it was up to her Mississippi. In fact, Yujie felt very strange. Her miss seemed to want to occupy the silence room of the first Miss Xiao. She had followed her miss up the mountain for such a long time and was very familiar with everything in this silence room. Except for the good scenery, she really didn't think there was anything good in it. However, she had always admired Xiao Wanru. Since her miss said so, of course, there must be a reason. She retreated to the outside of the courtyard, closed the door, hurried back to ask Chu Lu to come over, and then went to Puyu Nun, who was in charge of receiving pilgrims. She explained to Puyu Nun that her miss should be devoted to filial piety and copy 100 volumes of scriptures with peace of mind. Puyu Nun nodded repeatedly and immediately agreed to this request. She also said that even if someone from Duke Xing's mansion came over, she would help to refuse. After all, this was a filial act, which not everyone could do. Puyu Nun had a good relationship with Mingqiu Nun, so she had a better impression of Xiao Wanru. During the time when Xiao Wanru went up the mountain to cultivate in seclusion, she only occasionally saw Xiao Wanru a few times at Mingqiu Nun's place, but she rarely saw Xiao Wanru in other places. She admired the appearance of the fifth miss of the Xiao family after being stunned. It was really rare for such a beautiful girl at such a young age to meditate in the nunnery and observe mourning for her parents for 3 years in peace. In the past, other people would observe filial piety in their own mansions. Although they ate light food, they would not really eat so light food every day like ordinary nuns in the nunnery. How much perseverance it took to do this. The first Miss Xiao, who was said to be cultivating in seclusion on the mountain, actually did not eat all the food in the nunnery. From time to time, she would send her servant girl down the mountain to buy some food. Other people in the Yuhui nunnery didn't know it, but how could Puyu Nun, who was in charge of this area, not know it? However, he could only turn a blind eye to it. All the misses from aristocratic families who cultivated in seclusion on the mountain were like this, but the fifth Miss Xiao had cultivated in seclusion for the longest time and was the most sincere, which made her like her very much. After reporting to Puyu Nun, Yujie took her clothes and went down the mountain. She said that Rui, and great elder princess, asked her to go back and report the situation of her miss on the mountain. Rui, and great elder princess, was worried about her granddaughter, so she asked Yujie and Chu Lu to go down the mountain from time to time. Everyone in the Yuhui nunnery knew that. When she went out, she passed by a nun in a hurry. When the nun saw Yujie, she seemed to want to stop and say something. After Yujie smiled at her, she waved her hand and left. It could be seen that she was in a hurry. The nun was no longer in a hurry to go forward. She turned to report to Puyu Nun. The first Miss Xiao is coming back. After hearing the nun's report, Puyu Nun looked surprised. That's what the first Miss Xiao means. She said that the fifth Miss Xiao's birthday is coming. She wants to celebrate the fifth Miss Xiao's birthday and then live on the mountain for a period of time. She wants to ask Pushun Nun to appraise some of the paintings she has drawn in the mansion. She may live on the mountain for a period of time, so it's still her own courtyard. The courtyard was her own courtyard, so of course, the silence room was her own silence room. This was originally not a problem. Speaking of which, Xiao Wanru had borrowed it at that time. But the problem was that Yu Jie just said that Xiao Wanru had closed the silence room and didn't want anyone to disturb her. Of course, it was impossible for her to celebrate the so-called birthday. As for the silence room, she was transcribing scriptures and observing mourning for her parents. It was not appropriate to drive her out like this. Puyu Nun was also a smart person. After thinking for a while, she asked the nun to bring Yu Jie's original words to the servant girl sent by Duke Xing's mansion in front of the nunnery. Chapter 488. She doesn't intend to give up your silence room. Why? After hearing the servant girl's report, Madame of Duke Xing was annoyed at once. She reached out and slapped the table heavily, making the teacups on the table almost jump up with a gloomy face. It had been almost 3 years. In the past 3 years, she had not sent anyone to the Yuhui nunnery because she was afraid of causing trouble. At that time, it would be easier for her to say something bad. 3 years ago, the courtyard was burned down. Duke Xing's mansion had to make a concession and agreed that this girl could go to the Yuhui nunnery to cultivate in seclusion. Unexpectedly, this girl did not stop after going to the Yuhui nunnery. She even occupied the silence room that she had carefully prepared for her eldest daughter. That silence room would be of great use to her. If it weren't for her daughter's persuasion, she would have thought that the Yuhui nunnery had locked the silence room and refused to lend it to that girl. Mother, you are so naive. Compared with her, Xiao Yanru was very calm. She was so calm that there was almost no fluctuation in her heart. She felt that her mother was really ridiculous. If that little girl was so easy to deal with, she would not have gone directly to the Yuhui nunnery to observe mourning for her parents after they recognized each other as relatives. This matter was not a very honorable thing for the whole Duke Xing's mansion. Many people still said that the whole Duke Xing's mansion did not like the 5th Miss Xiao, who had been recognized by them, and did not treat the 5th Miss Xiao as their own flesh and blood. It was said that there were many people in Duke Xing's mansion who were heartless. Some people even said that old Madam and Madam of Duke Xing's mansion were not good people, so that the 5th Miss Xiao had to leave Duke Xing's mansion and stay in the nunnery to observe mourning for her parents quietly. There were different opinions, but her mother was still so naive that she thought that she could deal with Xiao Wanru with a wave of her hand. And because of Xiao Wanru, she had to leave the Yuhui nunnery in advance. The loss was not a little big. Being ridiculed by her own daughter for being too naive, Madame of Duke Xing's face turned red. Now I ask you what to do. That girl doesn't want to celebrate her birthday and only wants to observe mourning in seclusion in your silence room. Can you stop her from observing mourning for your uncle and aunt? Eldest uncle and aunt are my elders. Of course, I can't say that. Xiao Yanru said slowly. Look, you can't even do this, so what are you blaming me for? With what she said, we can't do anything about it. Even your grandmother can't make her give up the quiet room. How are you going to get your quiet room back? Madame of Duke Xing said angrily. We can't do anything, but that doesn't mean others can't. Xiao Yanru raised her head and said. She really looked down on her mother. Although her position as Madame of Duke Xing seemed to be very glorious, in fact, she couldn't even win her father's heart. She was so useless. He clearly had the support of his grandmother, and he also had a son and a daughter with himself and his brother, but he was jealous of those things, causing a rift between him and his father. Now, he couldn't even deal with a little girl, causing him to be implicated. Originally, this kind of thing only needed his mother to deal with, and he wouldn't be implicated. But his mother was so useless. Who are the others? Madame of Duke Xing was excited and no longer cared about the disrespect in her daughter's words. She had always been afraid of her daughter, so she really didn't dare to care too much about it. Mother, although 5th sister said that she didn't want to celebrate her birthday, you have to do something, right? Xiao Yanru ignored her question and asked in a different tone. I send a gift to her on the mountain every year. It's not like I didn't send it in previous years. But she is indifferent every time. Madame of Duke Xing pulled her handkerchief and said angrily. Previous years are previous years, and this time is this time. Since I said in the imperial palace that I would celebrate her birthday, you naturally have to make good preparations. This time, the gift must be more and better than in previous years. I will ask Grandma later if there are any gifts to send. At that time, you will send her the birthday gift from Duke Xing's mansion, Xiao Yanru said. You still ask your grandma for gifts on her behalf? Your grandma doesn't like her. You don't have to ask her. Madame of Duke Xing became increasingly unhappy. Mother, you are Madame of Duke Xing and fifth sister's second aunt. You are naturally her elder, but the real elder is Grandma. Grandma's words mean everything, but if you say one more word, it will make people doubt you. Xiao Yanru stood up and felt that she really had nothing to say to her mother. She had made it so clear, but her mother still cared about trifles. How's the thing I asked you to do before? Don't worry about it. Now it has begun to spread quietly. Being reprimanded by her daughter again and again, Madame of Duke Xing also felt ashamed, but she didn't want to say anything at this time, so she immediately said, I'll go to see Grandma. Ask people to work harder. Xiao Yanru instructed as she walked out. There were some things she didn't want to discuss with her mother, and she didn't want to say too much inside information. It was good for her mother to be her pawn. With this identity, she had an advantage. She thought that she was still stupid. She had so many advantages but didn't know how to cut the weeds and dig up the roots, so that now there were still troubles left, and she had to help her clear the obstacles. Hearing that her favorite granddaughter had come, old Madame hurriedly asked Nanny Yu to let her in. As soon as she entered the room and saw Xiao Yanru's beautiful face, old Madame was overjoyed. Without waiting for Xiao Yanru to salute, she took Xiao Yanru's hand and sat down beside her warmly. She asked someone to serve tea and said, Is it hot? Why did you leave in such a hurry? Grandma is not in a hurry. Although it had just entered autumn, it was still very hot. Along the way, Xiao Yanru's white and tender face was stained with sweat. Grandma, I'm not hot or tired. I just want to see Grandma, so I left in a hurry. In fact, it's not so hot. Xiao Yanru said softly, reached out to take a fan from the maid's hand, and personally fanned old Madame. Seeing her favorite granddaughter like this, old Madame felt more and more pity for her. She took the fan from her hand and said, Let the maids do it. You are a good Mississippi. How can you do this kind of thing? You'd better chat with Grandma. Okay. Xiao Yanru said cheerfully. Her delicate and obedient look was completely different from that in front of Madame of Duke Xing. After sitting down beside old Madame, Xiao Yanru said to Nanny Yu with a smile, Nanny Yu, what's new outside recently? Tell Grandma about it and make Grandma happy. Old Madame liked to listen to gossip outside to kill time. If the servants around her encountered something funny when they went out, they would tell old Madame about it, and old Madame would reward them when she heard it. Therefore, when the servants of old Madame went out, they would inquire about some strange things and tell old Madame about it. There is something, but it's not good. Nanny Yu said with a flattering smile. What do you mean by not good? Xiao Yanru asked in surprise. Nanny Yu was speechless for a moment and could only look at old Madame. It's not good. There is a jinx in our mansion. What good thing can there be? Old Madame thought of what Nanny Yu had heard before and said angrily. Jinx? Who is it? I heard that the jinx will really be unlucky. Xiao Yanru was frightened and asked with a pale face. It's all because of Xiao Wanru. She is a jinx. Why did we recognize her at the beginning? It's good to let her continue to stay in Qin's mansion. Old Madame patted the table angrily and sighed. What's going on? Xiao Yanru became more and more surprised. Your eldest uncle and aunt were obviously killed by her. After killing her parents, she will kill other elders. It's said that she has a tough life. Alas, how could such a person be so cruel to kill her parents? Fortunately, her birth destiny was suppressed by Bodhisattva in Yuhui Nunnery in the past 3 years. If she comes back, she will. Old Madam had a headache. If possible, she really didn't want this granddaughter to come back. It was a mistake to recognize her at the beginning, but now she had to let her come back. Thinking that the 3-year period was about to end, Old Madam felt that she had to think of a way to stop her from coming back. Grandma, these are all rumors. You can't take it seriously. Xiao Yenru advised softly. How is it just a rumor? Look, your big uncle was originally fine, but because of her, he lost his life. Your big aunt was also a lucky person, the princess of the royal family, but she still couldn't withstand it and died. Before this, almost lost his life, and your big brother's courtyard was burned down. All of these things happened, and it was all because of this jinx. Sigh, it's really a sin. Ah. Old Madam put her fist against her forehead and was extremely angry. If there was no Rui and Great Elder Princess, she could punish her as she liked. However, Rui and Great Elder Princess intervened. Even if Old Madam used her identity as an elder to suppress Xiao Wanru, she could only suppress Xiao Wanru, but could not make Rui and Great Elder Princess feel afraid of her. Even Rui and Great Elder Princess would be angry. In this regard, Old Madam was both helpless and worried. Grandma, forget it. These are all rumors. They can't be taken seriously, and no one can prove it. It's just a rumor. Grandma, fifth sister is going to celebrate her birthday. What gift are you going to give her? Show it to Shu-er. Shu-er can also be enlightened and have a basis. Xiao Yenru pulled Old Madam's sleeve intimately and said in a sweet voice. You still want to celebrate her birthday? What kind of birthday do you want to celebrate? You don't know what you are doing on the mountain. Old Madam said angrily. Grandma, it's Ru, who wants to celebrate fifth sister's birthday. Fifth sister will come back soon. If we don't celebrate her birthday, we may be estranged from each other after she comes back. Xiao Yenru became more and more coquettish. Xiao Wanru was coming back. These words heavily hit Old Madam's heart. She had been worried about Xiao Wanru's fate these days. Now hearing Xiao Yenru's words, she was in no mood to see her favorite granddaughter coquettishly. She immediately said with a cold face. She couldn't let Xiao Wanru come back. Otherwise, everyone in the mansion would die. Why does she come back? Let her stay in the Yuhui Nunnery all the time. Old Madam said coldly. Grandma, how can you do this? She didn't do anything wrong. How can she stay on the mountain all the time? What will others think of our Duke Xing's mansion? Xiao Yenru looked up in shock and said. She looked at Old Madam carefully and didn't dare to act coquettishly anymore. Why can't she stay on the mountain all the time? She has a bad reputation. Seeing that her eldest granddaughter was still pleading for her youngest granddaughter, Old Madam became increasingly angry. Her bad reputation is a rumor. It's fake. Xiao Yenru was still arguing. Fake can also be true. You don't have to worry about this. If you want to give her a gift, just do it. I will ask someone to give it to her. Xiao Yenru repeated questioning finally reminded Old Madam. Old Madam's eyes lit up. Chapter 489. Yujie came back after asking around the foot of the mountain. When she returned to the mountain, she jumped out of the carriage when it stopped. When she was about to go inside, she was suddenly stopped by someone. Are you the servant girl of the fifth miss? An old maid stood in front of a carriage with a smile, looked at Yujie, and asked with a smile. When Yujie went down the mountain, she changed into her own clothes and dressed as a servant girl. She didn't live in Duke Xing's mansion for a long time, so there were not many people who knew her. Moreover, 2.5 years had passed, so there were not many people who could recognize her. The old maid had seen Yujie before, but now she could only make a rough guess. Which fifth miss? Yujie frowned and took out some sundries from the carriage, which was full of things. The fifth miss of our Duke Xing's mansion. The old maid came over with a smile and reached out to help Yujie carry things. Yujie reached out to push her away, and then looked her up and down with unkind eyes. Who are you? It meant that she had found the right person. The old maid became happier and said cleverly, I am the servant of old madam. If there is something important, I will pass it on to the fifth miss on behalf of old madam. It is not convenient for our miss to see others now. She needs to clear her mind and copy scriptures to pray for blessings. Yujie refused. Everyone in the Yuhui nunnery knew about this. I won't disturb the fifth miss from copying scriptures. I just want to pass a message to her. The old maid became more polite with a smile, as if she didn't hear the refusal in Yujie's words. Yujie was silent for a moment and looked at the old maid with a very embarrassed look. Copying scriptures in front of the Buddha requires a clear mind. The fifth miss copied scriptures after burning incense sincerely. If she is disturbed, I'm afraid it will not be good. What do you mean? The fifth miss copied scriptures for filial piety and for the sake of heir of Duke and Infanta. But old madam is the fifth miss grandmother. Even if heir of Duke and Infanta know it in the afterlife, they will not blame the fifth Mississippi. The old maid seemed to have been prepared for this. As soon as Yujie said this, she immediately answered cleverly. These words made Yujie fall silent again. No matter who sent someone here today, even if it was sent by Duke Xing, no one could make the fifth miss pause. However, old madam of Duke Xing's mansion was an elder, and she was also the elder of heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua. It was reasonable for her to say this. You can only say 1 or 2 sentences. Yujie looked the old maid up and down and warned her. Don't worry. It's really just a matter of 1 or 2 sentences. It's about the fifth miss's birthday. The old maid smiled widely and nodded repeatedly. Yujie's heart skipped a beat. She picked up the things in her hands and walked inside. Come with me. Well, there are so many things. I'll help you carry some. The old maid reached out to help, but Yujie refused. I can carry them, but not many. As he spoke, he casually picked up his things and walked forward. Is Miss Wu happy living on the mountain? If you need anything, just tell us. Old madam means that no matter what the fifth miss needs, we should try our best to meet it. The fifth miss is now observing mourning on the mountain, and old madam is also chanting scriptures in the Buddha hall in the mansion. They have the same intention. Seeing that Yujie didn't want her help, the old maid rolled her eyes and took 2 steps forward to chat with her intimately. There's a temple in the mansion? Yujie asked. She had accompanied Xiao Wanru to live in Duke Xing's mansion for only a few days, so she really didn't know something about Duke Xing's mansion. Yes, how can there not be one? There has been one for a long time. The Buddha hall in the mansion is not small and has a large garden. Since the death of the heir and the Infanta, old madam has been sad. Every time she thinks of the past of the heir and the Infanta, she can't sleep. That's why she gets sick. Duke is afraid that old madam will be too sad, so he specially changed the small Buddha hall into a big Buddha hall and changed the whole big yard. The old maid sighed and said. In fact, the Buddha hall was not big or small, and it was the ancestral hall in the mansion. But no one would dislike more good words. Now every time old madam feels sad or thinks of the heir and the others, she will go to the Buddha hall. Duke Xing's wife also specially invited some nuns to help old madam preach scriptures. Some rich and powerful families had elders who believed in Buddhism. It was common for them to set up a small Buddha hall. After all, it was inconvenient for the elders to go out. Moreover, it was not safe. Chanting scriptures in the small Buddha hall, fiddling with incense sticks and so on, was also a necessary thing to calm the hearts of the elders. However, it was very rare to invite some nuns to come over. On the one hand, these nuns respected their reputation and couldn't be invited by anyone. On the other hand, it was really not easy to invite a famous nun and nuns. It was a simple thing. They were afraid that in the end, they would invite an unknown nun and make others laugh at them. Who are they invited by the mansion? Yujie was born in a nunnery, so she knew it well, so she asked calmly. Pushun nun of the Yuhui nunnery came here before. It was at that time that Pushun nun fell in love with the first miss, and the first miss also admired Pushun nun's painting skills. After that, Pushun nun went back to the mountain, and the first miss followed her up the mountain to learn painting. The old maid said. This was not a secret in Duke Xing's mansion. Who is it now? Thinking of the rumors at the foot of the mountain, Yujie continued to ask. There is no one now. I plan to invite a famous nun to live in our mansion for a period of time, but she hasn't come yet. The old maid's attitude was very good. She answered almost all the questions and happily talked with Yujie all the way. While talking, they arrived at the courtyard where the silence room was. Wait a minute. I'll report it to the fifth miss. Yujie stood at the door and said. Okay, I'll wait here. The old maid nodded with a smile. Seeing Yujie carrying things in, she looked around and recognized that this was the place where the first miss cultivated in seclusion before. A trace of sarcasm flashed across her eyes. As expected, the fifth miss occupied the first miss's place. She said that she cultivated in seclusion. It was obvious that she wanted to look at the first miss's courtyard and deliberately found an excuse. Yujie came out not long after she went in and said, My miss is copying a scroll of scripture. She asked you to wait a minute and let you in after she finishes. Of course, of course. The old maid nodded with a flattering smile. Yujie took a step back and closed the door in front of the old maid without hesitation. Then she heard her footsteps coming in. The old maid stood outside helplessly and waited. She was very anxious while waiting, especially when the old maid had something to do at this moment. Seeing that the sun was about to go down, she felt annoyed and impatient, but she did not dare to get angry. When she stood stiffly, the door finally opened. Yujie looked at the old maid expressionlessly and said, My miss asked you to come in. She was just a poor family. Why did she put on airs? The old maid secretly despised her in her heart, but she did not show it on her face. She still smiled, as if Xiao Wanru had asked her to come in and see her as soon as she stood at the door. Thank you, Fifth Mississippi. Thank you, Fifth Miss. The old maid moved her legs, which were about to become stiff, and followed Yujie inside. The door of the main room was tightly locked, and it seemed that there was no one there. However, there were traces of activity in the other rooms, which were not locked. They should have been used. She carefully remembered everything she saw and then followed Yujie into the quiet room where the first miss used to live. There was a woman sitting on the mat. When she saw the girl in front of her clearly, the old maid was so amazed that she almost couldn't speak. In the old maid's heart, the first miss was almost like a fairy and the first beauty. All the servants of Duke Xing's mansion were proud of this title. But was the girl in front of her really the fifth miss? At that time, the fifth miss was still very young. Although she looked exquisite, for the servants of Duke Xing's mansion, they had a more beautiful first miss, so they did not think that the fifth miss was so amazing. No matter how outstanding she was, could she be more outstanding than the first miss? No matter how beautiful she was, could she be more beautiful than the first miss? However, the young girl in front of him only had a simple hairpin to hold up her beautiful black hair, and a strand of hair casually hung beside her ear. Under her long and curly eyelashes, her black eyes were clear and transparent, but when her eyes moved, they seemed to be full of water. Her skin was like jade, and her lips were a deep red. Not only did the light black robe not ruin her beauty, but it also made her look a bit more charming under the light. She was naturally charming and hidden behind her elegant and pure behavior. At first glance, she attracted others' attention. After looking at her again, she became more and more amazing. Although the first miss was beautiful, compared with the fifth miss in front of her, the old maid felt that the first miss was inferior. When the two of them stood side by side, it was easy to tell who was better. Seeing that the old maid was so amazed that she couldn't even speak, Yujie reached out and gently pulled the old maid's sleeve. Only then did the old maid react and hurriedly step forward to salute. Xiao Wanru waved her hand lightly, looked down, and focused on a few pieces of paper beside her hand. These pieces of paper should be the scriptures she had copied just now, and there were dense small seal characters of plum blossoms on them. "Grandma, what's the matter?" Seeing that the old maid's reaction was a little slow, Xiao Wanru raised her head again and asked. She frowned slightly and looked a little unhappy. "Fifth Miss, old madam wants to celebrate your birthday, but it's not a big one. It's not convenient for you to stay in the Yuhui nunnery now. She just wants several misses to go up the mountain to accompany you, so that they can get along well with each other. After that, they can also follow you to the Yuhui nunnery to observe mourning for heir of Duke and Infanta for half a year." Half a year later, it was almost the day that Xiao Wanru originally scheduled to return to the mansion. She could refuse to celebrate her birthday, but it was not so easy to refuse to observe mourning for her father together. Moreover, it was proposed by old madam. "Go back and report to old madam, saying thank you for old madam's kindness. Grandma has already decided on this matter. Grandma means that she will also come to the Yuhui nunnery later and live in my courtyard for the time being. I will stay in the first Mrs. courtyard. If several sisters come together, they may not be able to stay here, and they can't copy scriptures for father and mother quietly." Xiao Wanru, who had prepared for this, said lightly. Old madam suppressed her with the identity of an elder, so she had to support Rui, and great elder princess. She had told Rui, and great elder princess about this before, because she was afraid that Duke Xing's mansion would do something evil. What about the birthday? Since it was Rui and great elder princess's idea, the old maid certainly did not dare to say anything more. She could only ask about the first thing with a hollow smile. Chapter 490. I can't do anything about my birthday. Grandma wants me to observe filial piety for my parents wholeheartedly. She said that I should observe filial piety for 3 years. How can I slack off because of my birthday? If I celebrate my birthday on the mountain, Grandma will definitely punish me. At that time, I'm afraid that my sisters will also be punished with me." Xiao Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice, and then she slowly raised her head. The corners of her lips, which were as beautiful as cherry blossoms, were slightly raised, showing a natural coquettishness. However, she didn't realize that there was a trace of purity in her watery eyes. That kind of indescribable beauty made the old maid involuntarily lower her eyes and not dare to look directly at her beauty. "But old madam wants several misses to accompany you. You are going back to the mansion and haven't been close to these misses. Old madam is afraid that you will be estranged at that time." Suppressing the amazement in her heart, the old maid persuaded again. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. Old madam said as if she was really thinking about her. If she was really thinking about her, how could she suddenly do this when she was about to finish observing filial piety for 3 years? She said that they should accompany her to observe filial piety. It was not enough to humiliate her, but she also wanted to use her to spread her reputation to the misses of Duke Xing's mansion. It was a good idea. She wanted to use her 3 years to make Xiao Yanru and the others famous. Xiao Wanru had no affection for such a Duke Xing's mansion. But now it was not the time to fall out with them. She would definitely make them pay for what they owed her. I can't make the decision. If old madam insists, you can discuss it with grandma. If grandma directly reprimands them, it will be bad. Xiao Wanru said with indifferent eyes. She looked at her hands and carefully looked at the words she had written casually. Everyone in the capital knew what kind of person Rui, and great elder princess was. She would not save face for anyone she disliked. It was a small matter to reprimand them directly, and she might drive them away without giving face. If great elder princess really reprimanded the misses of her family, it would be extremely shameful. The old maid couldn't make the decision. Seeing that the old maid couldn't say anything for a while, Xiao Wanru said again, "You'd better go back to the mansion and ask old madam for her opinion. If I can get my grandmother's permission, I'll do whatever the elders say." Because of the fire of Duke Xing's mansion at that time, her maternal grandma had the right to talk about her affairs. Her maternal grandma even asked the Empress Dowager for part of the right to speak about her marriage, which originally showed that old madam of Duke Xing's mansion was weaker than her maternal grandma. She didn't believe that old madam dared to discuss this matter with her grandmother. "Yes, I'll go back and report to old madam. I have one more thing. This is from old madam to you," the old maid said helplessly. She really couldn't make a decision on this matter. She reached out and took out a small brocade box from her sleeve and gave it to the old maid. Yujie stepped forward to take it and handed it to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru looked at the brocade box in Yujie's hand and said lightly without reaching out, "Open it." Yujie opened it according to Xiao Wanru's order. There was a longevity lock inside. She blinked and didn't understand what it meant, so she just looked at Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru put down the paper in her hand and reached out to take out the longevity lock from the box. She looked at it and found that it was a longevity lock worn by a child. It seemed to be a few years old. It was very exquisite, made of pure gold, and inlaid with a ruby and 2 cat's eye stones. After looking through it a few times and finding nothing, she raised her head and said, Why did old madam give it to me? When the young masters in the mansion were young, old madam gave them such a longevity lock. But fifth miss, you didn't grow up with old madam, so although this longevity lock was made long ago, it has never been given to you. The old maid said with a smile. It was made long ago. Did you know that there was a person like me long ago? Xiao Wanru looked through it a few more times and finally saw a small, Ru character in the thinnest corner. It was really hers. However, this Ru character was newly carved. At first glance, it could be seen that it was carved recently. When Infanta Qinghua married heir of Duke, old madam prepared it long ago. She was going to give it to fifth miss when she was born. Later, heir of Duke and Infanta left, and this longevity lock has been kept by old madam. After Infanta came back, she was not in good health, so old madam prayed for Master Hao and made a new one. Now fifth miss is back, this longevity lock is just right for fifth miss. The old maid explained the cause and effect with a smile. She was afraid that Xiao Wanru would feel unlucky, so she said, the longevity locks in the mansion are all like this, and Master Hao's is also of the same style. She said that she made a new one for praying for blessings, but she felt that the previous one was very unlucky. The old maid's explanation made it even more obvious. Thank old madam for me. Xiao Wanru didn't care about this now. Fifth miss, you're welcome. I'll go back first. After old madam and Rui and great elder princess discuss it, I'll come back to report it to you. The old maid said with a smile. She didn't feel annoyed because she didn't get what she wanted at all. She quickly glanced at everything in the silence room. There were only a few things that she could see clearly at a glance. Even the box covered with a blanket in the corner could be seen clearly. Xiao Wanru didn't say anything this time and just waved her hand. The old maid left respectfully. She carefully retreated to the outside of the silence room before rolling her eyes and walking out. Miss, what do you mean? Yujie looked at the back of the old maid leaving and then at the longevity lock in her master's hand. Her master had grown up. Did she still need to wear this longevity lock? Yujie, have a look. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and handed the longevity lock in her hand to Yujie. Yujie took it, picked it up and looked at it over and over again, but she didn't find anything. She only saw a small, Ru character in the corner of the longevity lock in front of her, which, of course, represented her master. Miss, I can't find anything. Yujie shook her head in confusion. She looked at it several times and subconsciously felt that there was something wrong with it, but she couldn't find anything wrong with it. Bring it to your nose and smell it. Xiao Wanru reminded her. She put her hand back, and her black hair fell on her shoulders. Originally, it was only pinned on the top of her hair with a hairpin. Yujia picked up the longevity lock, put it to her nose and sniffed it gently. There was a faint smell. If Xiao Wanru hadn't reminded her, she might not have been able to smell it. When she got closer, she found that it was indeed a very faint smell, which was almost non-existent. It was a little sweet, but it didn't seem like it. It felt a little strange, but it was not a medicinal material that Yujia was familiar with. "Miss, what is this?" Yujia was surprised. She was very sensitive to the smell of some traditional Chinese medicine. The smell at the moment should not be the smell of traditional Chinese medicine. "I don't know." Xiao Wanru shook her head. She sat by the window just now and didn't find anything. But when she looked around, she suddenly smelled a faint smell, which was so faint that she couldn't smell it. If it weren't for the fact that she had always been concerned about old madam's things, she would probably think that it was some smell coming from outside the window or the smell of the box itself. It was not the smell of traditional Chinese medicine that made people wary. It seemed to be the fragrance of flowers when she tasted it carefully. Some flowers in autumn had already bloomed, and the most fragrant one was the smell of osmanthus, which was much lighter than that of osmanthus. "Miss, what should I do?" Yujia shook her head, turned the longevity lock in her hand, and asked. Xiao Wanru suddenly sat up straight and reached out to pick up the box on the ground. As soon as she picked it up, she immediately found that the smell in the box was much stronger than that of the longevity lock. It was sweet, but there seemed to be some strange smell. It didn't smell very good, but it was not particularly unpleasant. The box was not big, but it was enough to hold a longevity lock. Moreover, it did look like the kind of box used to hold longevity locks. The size and shape were very suitable, and it seemed to be a little old. "Put it away first. Put another box on the outside of the box and then wrap it with a cloth. Send it to Grandma." Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said. She didn't know, but it didn't mean that her grandma didn't know. In the last life, she had locked herself in the backyard. In this life, she hadn't been in the capital for a long time, so it was normal that she didn't know some strange things. The only thing she could be sure of was that old madam would not have any good intentions toward her. "Yes, I'll go to Great Elder Princess's mansion later." Yujia nodded, put the longevity lock in her hand into the box, and then carefully closed it. "Miss, I went down the mountain to ask Nanny Dong, who also inquired about it. She said that there were orders from Duke Xing's mansion for toggle and loop buttons and embroidery, and there were more than one order. Since the first Miss Xiao returned to Duke Xing's mansion, these orders have appeared from time to time. Although I don't know which order it was, this kind of toggle and loop buttons and embroidery should be the most popular a year ago." Yujia put the box aside, pulled out a box from the things she had just brought in, and took out the previous set of clothes from it. Xiao Wanru was not surprised by this unclear answer. How could Xiao Yenru be easy to deal with? If she hadn't been killed by Xiao Yenru in the last life, she might not have suspected that Xiao Yenru was the mastermind in the end. It seemed that Xiao Yenru was involved in everything, but there was no evidence that she was involved. This was Xiao Yenru. Where is the material? Nanny Dong said that there was not much material, so it should be an offering. But this kind of offering may not be available in other mansions, but Duke Xing's mansion must have it. But this kind of offering can be said to be made by the first Miss Xiao or by you. After all, you are now the fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Yujia said what Nanny Dong had said exactly. Therefore, it couldn't be seen from the material. She raised her watery eyes slightly, and there was a trace of mist at the bottom of her eyes, covering all her emotions. It was another untraceable answer. As expected, it was Xiao Yenru who made it. Otherwise, it was impossible for it to be so secretive, as if she had blocked all the possible clues. Chapter 491. The collar was close to the neck. Not only did the material have to be firm, but it also had to be soft. There were very few clothes that could achieve these two characteristics. However, the rainbow muslin had these two characteristics, so it became one of the collars of the clothes. The requirement for sewing this dress was to be gorgeous, but the specific operation depended on the embroidery maids in the sewing room. Xiao Wanru could be sure that this dress came from the sewing room of Duke Xing's mansion. Although Xiao Yanru made a careful calculation, there was still a small error. Of course, this error was based on Xiao Wanru's knowledge of the colorful yarn. She knew about this dress given by her mother, Madame of Duke Xing, and the handkerchief given by Wang Yishu later. Otherwise, as a miss who had just arrived in the capital city, how could she know this kind of rare offering? Even the concubines in the imperial palace could not easily get a piece of such a big handkerchief. But Wang Yishu had it. Why did Wang Yishu have it? Of course, Duke Xing's mansion had it. At that time, she even made Wang Yishu say that she had a lot of this kind of handkerchief. At that time, she saw several misses look surprised. Although more misses didn't show anything on their faces, it was enough. At least a few misses recognized this material, knew that it was the most precious colorful yarn, and knew that Duke Xing's mansion had it. Of course, such a rare material could not belong to the fifth miss, who had just returned to her family and was disliked by everyone in Duke Xing's mansion. Madame Dong said that this is the colorful yarn. Madame Dong didn't know it at first, but later she met several nobles and they all showed this material to her. Yu Jie said with certainty. When you go to my maternal grandma's mansion, ask about the colorful yarn and ask if my maternal grandma has it. Xiao Wanru nodded, but there were some things she was not sure about, so she had to ask her maternal grandma for confirmation. When her grandma taught her how to make the colorful yarn, she was still an outsider after all, so there were some things that her grandma would not tell her in detail. I know. Then, shall I take this dress with me? Yu Jie asked. You don't have to take the dress with you. Just take the longevity lock with you. You don't have to go there today. Let's go tomorrow. Xiao Wanru looked out of the window and found that the sun had set. If she went out of the Yuhui nunnery at this time, it would not only attract attention, but also be unsafe. When she came back, the door of the nunnery had been closed early. Since she had made the decision, Yu Jie put the dress into the box in the corner again. The previous lock had been broken, so she had to find another lock. Now that she had made the decision, Yu Jie put the dress into the box in the corner again. The previous lock had been broken, so she had to find another lock. Under the lamp, Xiao Wanru wrote a letter and told Ruyan Great Elder Princess in detail what had happened on her side. There were many things that she was not clear about, but she did not conceal them. She would never compare her weaknesses with others' strengths. She could to Xiao, and to old, who could to the old duke, she, was, she, who was, and was, she, Wan, old, and had to say. Old, to. She, and she. The yen. She. Mansion, she would, she would, you, and she would, and she would, she. She would. She, Duke, and would, the so-called kinship was full of scheming and malice. She did not need or care about abandoning them. She just wanted to maintain a superficial affinity. As for other things, Duke Xing's mansion did not treat her well, and she did not treat Duke Xing's mansion well either. After writing the letter, she let out a long sigh of relief and put down the pen. Suddenly, she looked up subconsciously and saw a slender figure leaning against the window. A full moon slowly rose from the huge window and fell on his robe, which was a little cherry red. As the wind blew, the sleeves of his robe fluttered, looking strange and evil. Under the light, his face was very gentle and handsome. He used to be a pretty boy, but now he could be regarded as a handsome man. The only thing that remained unchanged was his elegance and handsomeness, as if he had walked out of a painting. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was looking at him, he walked over slowly and sat down on the other side of the table. He reached out gracefully, poured himself a cup of tea, took a sip slowly, and asked lazily, "What's wrong? Don't you recognize me?" Recently, because it was the most important stage of the treatment, the two of them had not seen each other for a year. Xiao Wanru reached out to hold Chu Liuchen's wrist and felt his pulse with her slender fingers. Sensing that the pulse under his wrist was still slow and sluggish, she couldn't help frowning. She didn't think he was much better than a year ago, but his lips were still pale. His illness seemed to be engraved in his bones. Did it not work? Her heart skipped a beat. When she wanted to let go of his wrist, she suddenly felt that the pulse under his hands suddenly beat wildly. Her face changed dramatically and she pressed her fingers heavily again. This time, she really felt that the pulse on Chu Liuchen's wrist was beating rapidly, which could not be compared with the sluggish pulse before. Your Highness, his pulse suddenly slowed down again. It was still the same as before, neither fast nor slow, as if he was dying. No matter how late Xiao Wanru was, she understood at this time. She loosened her hand and let go of Chu Liuchen's hand heavily. Your Highness, is it interesting? Of course it's interesting. Zhuozhua, do you think it's boring? Chu Liuchen smiled, stretched out his hand and patted Ru Wanru's head. Then his hand fell down and slid down her beautiful hair. His slender fingers curled up her beautiful hair, and a strand of hair curled into his fingers. He pulled it slightly, which made Xiao Wanru feel pain. She reached out to slap his hand, and then his hand fell down. He didn't know when he had such a hobby. Your Highness, have you recovered? Xiao Wanru asked with her eyes wide open. It could be seen that she was surprised and happy, and also seemed to be relieved. I haven't recovered yet. Chu Liuchen's slender eyes flashed with a trace of splendor, and he said with a gentle smile. Is there anything wrong with me? Xiao Wanru's smile froze on her little face. She blinked her big black eyes with a bit of caution and nervousness. It needs to be treated slowly, and it won't recover in a short time. Chu Liuchen picked up the teacup again and took a sip, and said slowly. It won't recover in a short time. Does it mean that I will recover as long as I take good care of it? This understanding made Xiao Wanru breathe a sigh of relief, and her eyes immediately became relaxed. When she picked up the teacup at hand and was about to drink it, she suddenly found that Chu Liuchen was looking at her with a faint smile. Her hands froze, and she silently put down the teacup in her hand. Her snow-white face was a little red. There was only one teacup on the table, which was hers and hers alone. The teacup that Chu Liuchen drank just now was hers. Now she picked it up again, but it was his. Chu Liuchen seemed to be in a good mood. Your Highness, why are you here now? Xiao Wanru pretended to wipe her hands with a handkerchief as if nothing had happened, and deliberately did not look at the teacup, which made her blush. I heard that Zhuozhua's birthday is coming, so I naturally have to come and have a look. Chu Liuchen smiled and lay down on the mat. He raised his beautiful eyes. Except for his lazy look, he really looked like a handsome child who was unparalleled in the world. It was a pity that he was sitting so loosely that he looked so lazy that he didn't even have a bone. Your Highness, where did you get the news? Xiao Wanru tilted her head slightly, and her waterfall-like hair slipped down from the side of her shoulder, making her look more petite and exquisite. Where else can I get the news? Many people in the palace have known it. I heard that it was the first miss of your mansion who said it in front of Imperial Grandmother in the palace. It seems that she is affectionate and is different from other people in Duke Xing's mansion. Chu Liuchen raised the corner of his mouth, looking gentle and noble. The so-called different from other people in Duke Xing's mansion meant that other people in Duke Xing's mansion had been unkind to Xiao Wanru before. This matter had been rumored in the capital city for a long time, and there were various versions of it because of the fire in Duke Xing's mansion. But no matter which version it was, the fifth Miss Xiao was a poor girl who was not favored. She was a poor child who returned to her family but was not valued by her family. Later, she had to leave home to observe filial piety for her parents. Because of Xiao Wanru, there was a lot of controversy about Duke Xing's mansion, which had always had a good reputation. Even the concubines in the palace felt that Duke Xing's mansion had done something wrong. At some banquets, they always heard someone mention it. When the womenfolk of Duke Xing's mansion went out, they all felt that it was a shameful thing and were more and more unwilling to mention Xiao Wanru. Now Xiao Yanru's words immediately made people praise her. On the one hand, she openly expressed her kindness to Xiao Wanru, and on the other hand, she was not in Duke Xing's mansion when it happened at that time. Your Highness, what do you think I should do? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows and asked. Deal with all changes by remaining unchanged. Recently, Imperial Grandmother has been choosing consorts for Prince Yu and Prince Zhou again. I think she can't sit still anymore. Chu Luchen turned sideways lazily and directly lay on the mat with his back facing the sky. He kicked the table on the mat away, and then pulled Xiao Wanru's sleeve and directly pulled her over. Before Xiao Wanru could react, he pulled her into his arms as usual and held her tightly. Xiao Wanru couldn't break free even if she wanted to. Your Highness. Xiao Wanru did want to reach out to push him away. She didn't expect that he could still move so skillfully after not seeing him for about a year. It seemed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and they had been together yesterday. However, her head was held by his arm, and her slender waist was held tightly by him. She couldn't get rid of him even if she wanted to. Sensing his hard chest, which was completely different from his sickly appearance, Xiao Wanru fell silent and then stopped struggling. The sense of strangeness in her heart, which they had met again after a year, disappeared unconsciously. Your Highness, who do you think she will marry? Xiao Wanru asked. I think she wants to marry all of them. Sensing Xiao Wanru's docility, the smile in Chu Liuchen's eyes became clearer. He suddenly sat up and blew out the lamp on the table that had been kicked away. The light went out and the room suddenly became dark, but the moon outside the window became obvious and shone in through the window. Chapter 492. Xiao Wanru was startled by Chu Liuchen's action. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice and she closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she found that it was not dark in front of her. She couldn't help raising her eyes to look out of the window. Outside the window, there were mountains, and the moonlight was gentle and extremely beautiful. Feeling more and more sensitive in the darkness, she sensed that her waist was held hard, and a jade pendant on her slender waist was pulled and played with by Chu Luchen. Your Highness, who do you think she is most likely to marry? Xiao Wanru was a little hot and wanted to push Chu Luchen away. She reached out and asked. However, her hand was caught by Chu Luchen, and then he pulled her aside. I don't think she can marry anyone. This answer made Xiao Wanru silent for a while. In the last life, Xiao Yanru did not marry anyone. Her intended husband could not be the emperor, but Prince Zhou and Prince Yu. However, in the end, she was not their princess, and Xiao Yanru did not wait to marry them because she entered the imperial palace. Xiao Yanru has such a good reputation and is so beautiful. Why can't she marry anyone? Her family background should be good enough. Xiao Wanru was very puzzled, which she had not figured out after her rebirth. Xiao Yanru could be said to have the first opportunity and all the benefits. Why couldn't she marry the one she wanted to marry? Moreover, she was a very scheming woman who even used unscrupulous means. A woman thinks that she can play with all the men in the world and all the men have to fall for her. She thinks too highly of herself. She is too perfect. Chu Luchen casually played with the jade pendant in his hand. This jade pendant was given to her by the Empress Dowager. He felt that it was not bad to play with, especially when it was hanging on her slender waist. Prince Yu and Prince Zhou also have feelings for her. Xiao Wanru tasted the meaning in his words and asked tentatively. Stay away from this woman in the future. She will not have a good end. Chu Luchen snorted coldly. It was unknown whether he meant that Xiao Wanru was right or wrong. Then he reached out and patted her head to warn her. Xiao Wanru curled her red lips and said, It's fine if she doesn't want to hurt me. But if she wants to hurt me, I'm not a pushover. She was sure that Xiao Yanru would not be kind to her and would definitely hurt her. Of course, she would not show any mercy. What happened in the last life was too mysterious. Xiao Wanru didn't want to tell Chu Luchen such a mysterious thing, but she couldn't explain her hostility to Xiao Yenru. The only explanation was that there was a reason for her to target Xiao Yenru in the future. I've sent a secret guard to guard you. If you need him, just use him. Chu Luchen said softly, and then changed the topic. Did Chu Liuxin come here today? Yes, he came with a few other ladies. It should be a blind date arranged by concubine Ming. Xiao Wanru said. She couldn't see the expression on Chu Liuchen's face clearly in the dark, but she knew that he didn't seem to be happy at the moment, so she explained. Chu Liuxin didn't hide it from her when he came here before. When he talked about it, Chu Liuxin complained, saying that none of his brothers got married when they were his age. Why did he have to urge them to get married so urgently? Why did he come here for the blind date instead of in the capital city? Could it be that he could get a blind date in a nunnery? Chu Luchen said unhappily. Well, I don't know. Xiao Wanru was speechless, but she also thought that Chu Luchen was right. The blind date should not be held in a nunnery. Next time he comes, ignore him. Chu Luchen snorted. He also brought a letter to Xiao Yenru for me today. Xiao Wanru's watery eyes still looked brilliant in the moonlight. Why did he get involved in it again? If he brought a letter to Duke Xing's mansion, he would also get himself into trouble. Chu Luchen said lightly. Although his voice was as gentle as his master's, Xiao Wanru could hear some sarcasm. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. She was extremely surprised and said, could it be that Xiao Yenru is interested in Prince Xen? Why not? Didn't you say that you have a good impression of her? Although Chu Liuxin doesn't make much progress, he is still a prince. Maybe she will be interested in him. His words made Xiao Wanru silent for a long time. It seemed that she was surprised that Xiao Wanru was so quiet at this time. Chu Luchen touched her pink cheek with his hand and even pulled it maliciously. Xiao Wanru felt so painful that she slapped his hand away. What about His Highness? Didn't she look for His Highness? Chu Liuxin was an indifferent person, so was Chu Luchen. Since Chu Liuxin was interested in her, Chu Luchen might also be interested in her. Although he was in an awkward position and had always been in poor health, he was favored by the Empress Dowager and the Emperor after all. Of course she did. But after being slapped by me, everything became peaceful. Chu Luchen said lazily. What? His Highness slapped her. After being stunned for a moment, Xiao Wanru turned over and stood up. She put one hand on Chu Liuchen's chest and said in surprise. This was something she didn't know in her 2 lives. When did it happen? About 3 years or so. This king can't remember exactly when. She almost bumped into this king's arms. This king was angry and gave her a slap. After that, this king also fell. Chu Luchen reached out his hand and knocked on her elbow. A sore feeling made Xiao Wanru's hand sore. She directly fell down and pressed on Chu Liuchen's chest. This was a more shameful position than before. Xiao Wanru's face turned red. She hurriedly turned to one side and still looked like she was half held by him before. At this time, she was glad that there was no light. Otherwise, he would laugh at her. She calmed down and asked again, this should have happened before she came to the Yuhui nunnery, right? It should be. I didn't notice it. As long as she doesn't provoke me, I don't care how many men she seduces in this way, as long as she doesn't disgust me. Chu Luchen reached out his hand to make her lie down more comfortably without changing his expression. In the darkness, no one noticed the hostility in his treacherous eyes. Your Highness, do you know why Xiao Wanru built this quiet room? Is this quiet room really just for learning painting? This place is really good. Xiao Wanru finally calmed down and asked. I really didn't notice it. If you want to check it, you can ask someone to do it. I left you the secret guard you used in Duke Xing's mansion. If you need anything, you can find him. Next time, ask Xiao Xuanzi to instruct your servant girl named Yujie. This servant girl seems to be strong and powerful. If you have time, you can ask her to come to my mansion to learn martial arts. Chu Luchen closed his eyes calmly and said. He smelled the faint fragrance of a girl. It was not the kind of fragrance of powder, but the faint body smell of a girl with a slight fragrance. In such a night, it made people feel very peaceful. The place in his heart that had been empty for many years had been filled up at some time. As his voice became lower and disappeared completely, the sound in the room became quiet for a while. Suddenly, there was a low knock on the door. Once, twice, thrice. Xiao Wanru was shocked and hurriedly opened her eyes. She almost fell asleep just now. Chu Luchen reached out to hold her slender waist and pulled her into his arms again. After hugging her for a while, he put her down and sat up. He tidied up his robe and said, I'll go back first. If there is any sound later, remember not to come out. Xiao Wanru nodded silently and also sat up. Watching him open the door and leave, she frowned tightly and looked at the dark place at the door. After waiting for a while, she suddenly heard a loud sound coming from outside and the sound of weapons clashing. She couldn't help holding her knees with a nervous look in her eyes. Mississippi Yujie hurried in and closed the door of the silence room. There was no light in the room, so she couldn't find Xiao Wanru for a while. Come here. I'm on the mat. Be careful of the table in front of you. In the dark, Xiao Wanru saw Yujie clearly and reminded her softly. The table that had been kicked out happened to be in front of Yujie at this time. Yujie hurriedly reached out to hold it and touched the low table. While holding the table and walking towards the mat, she said, Miss, the prince told you not to go out. What's going on outside? Even though the door was closed, she could still hear the sound of weapons clashing. I don't know. Just now, I took a peek and found that it was coming from the other side of the wall. I don't know if something happened or if it was the wall. I don't know what happened or what happened over there. Yujie said uneasily. She had just been warned by Xiao Xuanzi not to go out. This matter had nothing to do with them. If she got involved, she would get into big trouble. The high wall. Xiao Wanru frowned. She had an intuition that it had something to do with the former emperor's concubines. She had always wondered whether Xiao Wanru chose to cultivate here and said that she wanted to learn painting well not only to fish for fame but also for other purposes. Otherwise, why would she spend so much energy and money? This silence room looked simple on the surface, but in fact, it was not simple at all. Every plant and tree inside was very exquisite. It could be seen that a lot of effort had been spent on it, and it could not be built overnight. It seemed to be too ostentatious just for the sake of fishing for fame. What was more coincidental was that the high wall was next to it, and the location of the side door was much closer than the courtyard where she lived. What did Xiao Wanru want, or what did Duke Xing's mansion want? She quickly thought of the things in her last life. Suddenly, she thought of a person who was related to Xiao Yanru. This person seemed to have a deep connection with Xiao Yanru, but there seemed to be no special relationship between her and Xiao Yanru. In fact, she was quite surprised to suddenly think of this person at this time. Because that person was found from the common people. Chapter 493. As soon as the news that a villain suddenly appeared in the Yuhui nunnery and intended to kidnap the former emperors, the whole capital city was in an uproar. The Yuhui nunnery was very famous. Not only did Buddha have a spirit, but also the former emperors' s were locked in it. Of course, this was just a legend. Few people really entered the deepest part of the Yuhui nunnery and saw those s locked up. They were once beautiful, but now, they were nothing more than green lamps and ancient Buddhas. Even if someone remembered them, it was just a pity that they didn't have children. Who asked them to not have children? The issue of the former emperor's heirs was the former emperor's biggest weakness. Dongzong had been established for decades, and it was the founding emperor and the former emperor who had single-handedly conquered the country. However, because of the issue of heirs, the ministers who had been loyal to the former emperor were now also loyal to the current emperor. There was nothing to say. Even if Prince Chen was alive, he was just waiting for death. Looks like it's okay. Who knew how long he could live? Even if someone wanted to make use of Chu Luchen, they had to be able to make use of him. It was said that he was lying in bed now, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. The stomachs of the S were disappointing and they deserved to be locked up. Many of the loyal officials of the late emperor who hated their stomachs for not being able to live up to expectations cursed in their hearts. But even if he scolded them in secret, he could only scold them in secret. Moreover, it had been a long time since the incident. Even Chu Luchen, the only son of the late emperor, was about to die. What was the point of scolding a few women? As for assassinating them, he didn't think it was necessary. They were just waiting for death in the depths of the Yuhui nunnery. It would be troublesome to kill them. There were only a few nuns guarding the Yuhui nunnery. There was no need to pay much attention to other aspects. But just when everyone was careless, something happened in the Yuhui nunnery. Some nuns were killed, and it was said that the former emperor's S were also killed. After it shocked the whole capital city, the emperor was furious and sent someone to the Yuhui nunnery to investigate the matter. He immediately requested to find out the truth of the matter and not to let anyone kill the former emperor's S. The meaning of this was enough to make the emperor unable to sit still. Although they were just a few useless women waiting to die, if they were killed, it would be another matter. They might even doubt the legitimacy of the emperor. If that was the case, they really couldn't be underestimated. Therefore, few men appeared in the Yuhui nunnery. A large number of soldiers of the Ministry of Justice began to come in and out. Some misses of aristocratic families who had been cultivating in seclusion on the mountain had to go back to their mansions for fear of getting into trouble. At this time, they should stay as far away as possible. No one was willing to get involved in the issue of the throne. If he was not careful, he might provoke the 9 clans. Xiao Wanru didn't move, but when the officials of the Ministry of Justice came to check, Rui, and Great Elder Princess was already there. The procurator of the Ministry of Justice had to wait outside for a long time before he saw Great Elder Princess. Greetings, Great Elder Princess. The procurator of the Ministry of Justice stepped forward and saluted Rui, and Great Elder Princess. What is it? Great Elder Princess asked coldly. I want to ask where 5th Miss Xiao was at that time. Did she hear anything or see anything? The quiet room where 5th Miss Xiao was at that time was not far from the place where the accident happened. She should have heard something. The procurator answered carefully for fear of annoying Great Elder Princess. Are you suspecting my granddaughter? Great Elder Princess's face became colder and colder. I'm not suspecting. I just want to ask 5th Miss Xiao if. The procurator swallowed his breath and said awkwardly. This was an order from his superior, and he had to do it. However, this matter would obviously offend Rui, and Great Elder Princess. It was said that Great Elder Princess doted on 5th Miss Xiao as if she was a treasure. How dare you! Great Elder Princess slammed her hand on the table so hard that the teacup on it almost fell down. The sweat on the procurator's forehead came down immediately. Grandma, don't be angry. This is a routine matter. You can let him ask. You can feel at ease if he asks. Xiao Wanru said softly to help him out. Yes, Great Elder Princess, this is an order from the Emperor. It is a routine matter. I just want to ask 5th Miss Xiao. After that, I dare not disturb her again. The procurator nodded repeatedly, for fear that he would make Great Elder Princess angry again if he spoke slowly. It was impossible for him to suspect the 5th Miss of Duke Xing's mansion, who had been practicing in seclusion on the mountain for almost 3 years. Before they came here, they had also investigated the various situations of the misses who were practicing in seclusion on the mountain. They knew that 5th Miss Xiao was observing filial piety on the mountain, and the 3-year period was coming to an end. She was young, had an extraordinary status, and was a delicate woman. Moreover, she had cultivated for many years and observed filial piety for her parents. Speaking of this, it was a very admirable thing. She was not like those elegant women who said that she cultivated in seclusion, but in reality, she was just enjoying the scenery on the mountain and admiring the flowers. Just based on this point, the prefect judge admired this determined young lady from the heart. Hearing that she helped him out of trouble, he had a better impression of her. Then you can ask. I will listen here. Rui, and great elder princess said slowly after being silent for a while. Yes, I will answer quickly. It is just a routine matter. Thank you, great elder princess. The procurator wiped his sweat and thanked her repeatedly. Then he raised his head to look at the fifth Miss Xiao. When he entered the door, he only noticed great elder princess, so he did not dare to look around. When he saw the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him, he could not help but be stunned. But he reacted quickly. He hurriedly lowered his head and was secretly amazed by her beauty. This was the daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua. She was so beautiful that she could be called an exceedingly beautiful woman. He had seen the most beautiful woman in the capital city. But in the eyes of this prefectural judge, the so-called most beautiful woman in the capital city was not as beautiful as the one in front of him. Fifth Miss Xiao, what were you doing when the accident happened? The procurator was also a determined person. After being amazed, he immediately became clear-headed and lowered his head to ask. For the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him, he thought it was better not to look at her shimmery eyes. Otherwise, he would feel that any question he asked was a blasphemy to the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him. That day, I had gone to bed early. But later I heard the sound outside, which seemed to be weapons. My servant girl also heard it, so she stayed with me that night. Xiao Wanru said gracefully. Chu Luqian put out the candle early. Even if someone noticed her, they would think that she had fallen asleep. Moreover, she did fall asleep at this time in the past. Anything else unexpected? The procurator became serious and asked after thinking for a while. Nothing else. Then I fell asleep with my servant girl's back. When I woke up, it was already chaotic outside. The nun in the nunnery sent several groups of people to ask if it was safe. After that, my grandma also came, Xiao Wanru answered. This was indeed the truth at that time. After Yujia came in to accompany her, they did not say anything. They just listened to the sound of weapons outside in silence. Yujia had been worried that someone would come, but Xiao Wanru did not worry about it. Later, she fell asleep with her back against the mat. Fifth Miss Xiao, can you allow me to ask your servant girl again? The procurator heard Xiao Wanru's words and said with a nod. Go ahead. Xiao Wanru nodded. Yujia then followed the procurator to the yard to ask. You were really not scared yesterday? Great elder princess looked Xiao Wanru up and down and asked with concern. Before she could say anything, the procurator of the Ministry of Justice came in. Grandma, don't worry. I'm fine. Xiao Wanru said with a charming smile. She reached out to pull great elder princess's clothes and shook it coquettishly. She was really close to her grandma. Before she found out her origin, she had been very close to Rui, and great elder princess. It turned out that her grandma really loved her. She stood by her side and considered everything for her. It's good that you're fine. Do you want to go down the mountain? It's not safe to live up there. I don't know what will happen. Although Rui and great elder princess breathed a sigh of relief, she still felt worried. Grandma, don't worry. Even if it was not safe before, it will be very safe now. The people of the Ministry of Justice are keeping an eye on it. What can happen in the Yuhui nunnery? Besides, if I go back, I have to go back to Duke Xing's mansion, but I don't want to go there. Xiao Wanru said directly in a charming voice. Her words made Rui and great elder princess feel distressed. She hated old madam of Duke Xing's mansion more and more. If old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion had not been merciful, her granddaughter would not have fallen into such a situation. Grandma, if I go back at this time, I will not only be controlled by them, but also wasted the past 2.5 years. People will only laugh at me for not being filial and perseverance. Even my father and mother in the netherworld will probably blame me. Xiao Wanru's eyes turned red and she said gloomily. If she went back at this time, her good reputation that she had worked so hard to build would be in vain. Of course, Rui and Great Elder Princess knew this, but she was more reluctant to leave her granddaughter for fear that something bad would happen to her. For a moment, she was angry and sad and couldn't even say a word. Grandma, if you have time recently, come to the mountain to see me. You can live in my courtyard, and I'd better live here. Madame of Duke Xing wanted me to go down the mountain before, and she has sent me several letters. Old Madame also said that she would hold a birthday party for me in the Yuhui nunnery. Xiao Wanru raised the corner of her mouth sarcastically and said what she had intended to say to Yujie when she went down the mountain. What? Does she really think that the Yuhui nunnery is her backyard and she can come and go as she pleases? Rui and Great Elder Princess snorted and her face turned pale with anger. In fact, she had planned to go up the mountain today because of the words from the Empress Dowager, saying that the first miss of Xiao's mansion publicly expressed her deep sisterhood with her granddaughter and said that she would hold a birthday party for her granddaughter in the Yuhui nunnery. Now even old Madame of Duke Xing said so. She was really muddle-headed. Zhuozhuo, don't worry. As long as I am here, I will never let them make trouble about holding a birthday party. The Yuhui nunnery is not a place where Duke Xing's mansion can do whatever they want. Rui and Great Elder Princess became more and more annoyed and sneered. Such a big thing had happened in the Yuhui nunnery, but Duke Xing's mansion had not sent anyone to ask about it. She would never spare the old muddle-headed for this matter. Chapter 494. When the door was opened, Xiao Yanru came in with a maid. She was wearing a light peach-colored 8-piece dress, with a plum-shaped silk ribbon around her waist and a slender waist. Looking up, Xiao Yanru could see a light purple gauze dress, a light pink half-arm, and her elegant temperament. At first glance, people would think that the woman in front of them was elegant and outstanding, and her delicate face made her look even more outstanding. After entering the door, she didn't look around but just bowed respectfully to Rui and Great Elder Princess sitting in the middle and said, "Greetings, Great Elder Princess. Get up." Great Elder Princess waved her hand peacefully and motioned her to get up. "Great Elder Princess, where is my fifth sister?" Grandma and mother were very anxious when they heard that something happened in the Yuhui nunnery. Grandma also suffered from an old illness for a while. Mother was busy taking care of her, so she asked me to come to see my fifth sister. If you can't live here anymore, you can go back to the mansion first and come back to live after the matter here is settled. Xiao Yanru raised her head with a gentle smile full of concern on her face. Rui and Great Elder Princess's eyes fell on Xiao Yanru's face. In the past 2 years, Xiao Yanru rarely appeared in front of others and only said that she wanted to focus on learning painting. Now it seemed that this first miss of Xiao's mansion was really unusual and it was reasonable for her to say that at this time. Zhuozhuo was frightened last night and can't get up now. Great Elder Princess sighed with a little sadness on her face. Fifth sister was frightened and fell ill. The smile on Xiao Yanru's face also faded and became a little sad. Her every move seemed to be very sincere and made people feel good about her. Such a big thing happened not far away. She is just a child and she is alone here. How can she not be afraid? Speaking of this, Rui and Great Elder Princess looked cold and said, "Your grandma is sick now. Did he fall sick from fear at this critical juncture?" Xiao Wanru was not far away from the scene of the accident, but old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion was far away. Rui and Great Elder Princess's words obviously contained a little sarcasm. Grandma is suffering from an old illness. Since autumn, she has been in poor health from time to time and often gets sick in bed. She has been like this these days. If it weren't for this reason, Grandma would have come to see fifth sister long ago. Fifth sister has been in the Yuhui nunnery for the past few years, and she would cry every time she mentioned it. Xiao Yenru said softly, as if she didn't hear the sarcasm in Great Elder Princess's words. She still treated Great Elder Princess's words sincerely and explained sincerely. Behind the bamboo curtain, Xiao Wanru showed a cold smile on her cherry lips. Xiao Yenru was really not easy to deal with. What she said made people feel that she really wanted to be on good terms with her. Even if the elders had shortcomings, she would try her best to make up for it. Even if she couldn't make up for it, she couldn't be blamed. After all, those people were her elders. No wonder she had such a good reputation outside. In Chu Liuxin's eyes, she was also a very good person who valued sisterhood very much. Sisterhood? In this life, Xiao Yenru was in a different situation. Her birth experience had been exposed, so she talked about sisterhood with her. In the last life, she also talked about sisterhood with her. Sure enough, this sisterhood was conditional, and it was conditional for others to see. Xiao Yenru's words were very appropriate. It not only explained old madam's health condition, but also showed that old madam valued Xiao Wanru. Although Great Elder Princess didn't quite believe it, at least she wouldn't really embarrass Xiao Yenru. Although she didn't get along with old madam and madam of Duke Xing, she wouldn't go too far with Xiao Yenru, a junior. Is not feeling well now, so it's inconvenient for her to meet guests. First Miss Xiao, please go back first. Although she wouldn't go too far, Rui and Great Elder Princess didn't like Xiao Yenru very much, so she immediately waved her hand and said, "Yes, these are some nourishing herbs. Grandma asked me to bring them up the mountain to fifth sister. Please give them to fifth sister later." Xiao Yenru said softly and pointed to the gifts brought by the servant girl. Great Elder Princess nodded and looked like she didn't want to talk anymore. Xiao Yenru asked the servant girl to put the gifts at the door and left slowly. When she came to the yard, she saw two servant girls standing on the side to serve Xiao Yenru. She nodded and asked Yujie, who was Xiao Wanru's servant girl. Then she asked about the details of her daily diet and what happened last night with concern. Yujie had been asked by the deputy of the Ministry of Justice before. Now Xiao Yenru asked her again, so she told her in detail. Xiao Yenru also asked her to serve Xiao Wanru well and report to Duke Xing's mansion if anything happened. After that, she left with the servant girl. After leaving the courtyard, he turned around to take a look before decisively turning around to leave. She went to the Zen room of Pushun Nun. She could be regarded as Pushun Nun's disciple. Since she had come to the Yuhui nunnery, she should visit Pushun Nun. After talking with Pushun Nun for about 2 hours in the Zen room, Xiao Yenru left. The number of people coming and going at the gate of the Yuhui nunnery was about twice as much as usual, and most of them were from the Ministry of Justice. Xiao Yenru stood at the gate and didn't get on the carriage immediately. She looked back and narrowed her eyes, looking at the officials of the Ministry of Justice who were in a hurry. She put down her handkerchief and slightly pressed the corner of her mouth to cover a trace of sarcasm. Then she got on the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion and went all the way to Duke Xing's mansion. When the carriage stopped, she got out of the carriage and saw her eldest brother walking out in a hurry. Seeing her get out of the carriage, he stopped and waited for her to come over. "Eldest brother, where are you going?" Xiao Yenru came over and asked. "When Shiqi invited me to a tea party." Xiao Hua, then, the first young master of Duke Xing's mansion, waved the fan in his hand and looked elegant. Both brother and sister were very good-looking. Xiao Hua and also looked gentle and elegant. He had a good reputation for talent, but he had missed the last round of the imperial examination in spring and wanted to have a try in this round. Qi Tianyu got the 3rd place in the last round, and Wen Shiqi got the 1st place. When Shiqi first worked in the Hanlin Academy, and in just over 2 years, he entered the Ministry of Justice. It could be said that he had a bright future. Those who entered the officialdom at the same time as him were at most crawling in the Hanlin Academy. None of them officially entered the 6 ministries like him. the 6 ministries had always been the framework of the entire imperial court. Xiao Hua and Wen Shiqi grew up together, so he didn't feel alienated just because of Wen Shiqi's promotion. Such a big thing happened in the Yuhui nunnery, but Wen Shiqi, as an official of the Ministry of Justice, didn't go to investigate it. Instead, he was in the mood to hold a tea party. It was really surprising. Is it only eldest brother? How can it be only me? Many talents in the capital city will go there. In fact, the invitation card has been prepared for a long time. It was supposed to be cancelled today, but when Shiqi said it was unnecessary. He was free in the morning, and it was his turn in the afternoon. He asked us to go there in the morning. Xiao Hua explained. Then he looked behind Xiao Yanru and said with a frown, "Fifth sister won't go down the mountain." Didn't he say that something like this happened? It's not suitable for her to stay on the mountain as a girl. Eldest brother, do you want her to go down the mountain? Xiao Yanru smiled and suddenly said meaningfully. Xiao Hua spread his hands and said, "Can I have the final say in this kind of thing?" Xiao Yanru smiled more and said meaningfully, "We can't have the final say in this matter. But it's our mansion's business. It's not easy for them to intervene. Sister, you know. You can deal with this matter. I'm going to meet my friends." Xiao Hua said and strode out. There were some things that the brother and sister were well aware of. Seeing her eldest brother leave, Xiao Yanru smiled and walked inside. She had to go to old madam's place. Her maternal grandmother was Rui, and great elder princess, so what? She couldn't be compared with her biological grandmother, right? Because she had to take care of Xiao Wanru, Rui, and great elder princess temporarily lived in Xiao Wanru's courtyard. Xiao Wanru lived in Xiao Yanru's courtyard. 2 servant girls, Chu Lu and Yujie, also came to serve her. Then she was accompanied by a little servant girl named Qing Er. Because she was just a low-class servant girl, many people who paid attention to her didn't pay attention to her and thought that she was sent by Rui, and great elder princess to serve Xiao Wanru. The people in the Yuhui nunnery were interrogated again and again. Even Xiao Wanru was interrogated twice. The rest of the people were interrogated again and again. Since such a big thing happened in the Yuhui nunnery, the number of pilgrims who were going to come to the mountain immediately decreased by half. Everyone just wanted to pray quietly. No one wanted to make trouble while praying to the Buddha. One day, when Shiqi suddenly came to see her. In the past few days, although Xiao Wanru didn't go out of the courtyard or even the silence room, she still knew clearly what had happened outside. Qing ran around outside all day long, so she could get a lot of news. Moreover, she was less conspicuous than Yujie and Chu Lu. Hearing that when Shiqi asked to see her, Xiao Wanru paused for a moment and said to Yujie, "Ask if Lord Wen has anything to do with me." Yujie nodded and left. After a while, she came back and reported, "Lord Wen said that he had misunderstood you before and wanted to apologize to you in person." Xiao Wanru put down the brush in her hand and looked at a cassia tree she had painted. After thinking for a moment, she said, "Go and tell Lord Wen that there is no need to apologize. It has passed. It doesn't matter." 2 years ago, when Shiqi suspected that she had an ulterior motive for getting close to her. Although time had passed, she had saved the person she should save and repaid the kindness she should repay. At this time in the last life, when Shiqi had already been in trouble and had been bedridden. In the last life, he was not the top scholar in the same period as Wen Tianyu. In this life, his fate had changed. Judging from the way he treated Gu Shishu that day, she knew that he would not repeat the same mistake. In this case, his future had nothing to do with her. That was all she could do for him. Moreover, she was in trouble now. If others found out that she had a relationship with Wen Shiqi, it would not be good for him or herself. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.